Magical lineage. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26, Level 5. It was like a drop of water falling into a dark water surface. The calm was broken. Circles of white ripples appeared. A large number of colorful light spots emerged from the edge of the dark, constantly merging into the white light ripples. In the hut, the candles made of beeswax burned quietly, occasionally bursting out a little light and making extremely subtle explosions. Ronan sat quietly on the bed, his eyes closed, his expression peaceful. On the edge of the wooden bed under him, a line of small words clearly appeared: "The soul is the destination of immortality." Buzz, accompanied by a strange trembling sound. It seemed that an invisible and transparent force suddenly spread out from Ronan. His robes were blown up without wind, and the candles on the table were instantly extinguished. The darkness lasted for a few seconds, and a candle flame was reignited, and the dim light shone on Ronan's handsome and bright face. Huh? Ronan blew out a match in his hand, and there was unconcealed joy between his eyebrows. Blinking, he called up his character panel. Name: Ronan Damien. Age: 16. Talent: no attribute. Affinity: Strength, Level 5 Wizard Apprentice, 1%. Skills: Basic Meditation, Expert 122 out of 800. Energy Missile, Expert 635/800. Charged Weapon, Mastered 45 out of 400. Rune Marking, Clean, Proficient 135/200. Shining, Beginner 81 out of 100. Ascetic Body Forging, Proficient 75/200. Basic Swordsmanship, Beginner 21/100. Level 5. Finally a Level 5 apprentice. Ronan flipped through a panel many times before closing it with satisfaction. Strength is the foundation of everything. In this turbulent time, every bit of strength growth can bring him a little more sense of security. It's a pity that the low-level concentration potion is probably completely ineffective on me. Ronan sighed. He didn't think he could break the iron rule that 5 bottles of low-level concentration potions would have full resistance. He didn't want to try again. To be honest, the effect of the 5th bottle of concentration potion was not worth it compared to the price. If I take drugs in the future, I can only take intermediate-level nourishing potions. That stuff is not cheap. On weekdays, when the price is not raised, it costs 15 low-level magic stones. Now, Ronan estimated that it would cost at least 1 intermediate magic stone or more. He really couldn't afford it at this stage. Let's save some money first, calm down, and use meditation to consolidate the skyrocketing mental power. Ronan thought to himself. He didn't expect that he would fall into the state of poverty so soon. It must be said that taking drugs is really not something that people from ordinary families can do. It's too expensive. With an empty pocket, the motivation to make money is particularly strong. Ronan took advantage of his recent breakthrough, full of energy, and in a good state, and was preparing to study the protection rune again. But before he could even sit down at the workbench and get comfortable, he heard someone calling his name quietly under the tree outside. Ronan. Ronan's expression changed, and he quickly grabbed the one-handed sword on the wall, inserted it to the most convenient position on his waist, and then carefully covered it with his robe before walking out. After the beginning of autumn, the fireflies that were originally prosperous in the forest at night became much less. Ronan stood at the door of the treehouse, squinting his eyes to look at the figure holding the oil lamp under the tree. After confirming that it was correct, he set out. He casually pulled a vine with yellow leaves, used it twice to gain leverage, and let go. Ronan landed on the ground in a graceful and steady manner. Old Wells under the tree raised his head slightly, looked at him deeply with a surprised look as if he was getting to know him again, but did not say anything, just whispered, "Follow me." After that, he turned around and left. Old Wells led the way with a lamp in his hand, and Ronan followed closely behind. The two of them followed the dark forest path and moved forward. No one spoke along the way. When they reached a small path, swish! Suddenly, there was a loud sound of something rushing through the bushes. Ronan was startled and put his hand directly on the hilt of the one-handed sword under his robe. He and Old Wells stopped almost at the same time. The sudden movement in front of him also stopped abruptly. Ronan took a light breath, took a step forward and walked in front of Old Wells. After looking at him, he slowly moved forward. He was ready to cast a spell at any time. Ronan took a few steps forward, paused, and slowly relaxed his hand holding the hilt of the one-handed sword under his robe. He looked indifferently at a male wizard who was standing a few meters away from him, carrying a lot of bags and small bags. In one hand, he tightly grasped a short staff like a dead branch, and the top of the staff emitted a faint white light. Seeing his pale face and sweating, he was obviously very nervous. Old Wells came up and took a look, sighed, and then slowly stepped aside 2 steps. Ronan also stepped aside. The male wizard was as if he had been pardoned. He hurriedly picked up his things and ran past the 2 people, not caring about how embarrassed he was. Another one who secretly moved at night. Ronan watched the male wizard, who was only a second-level wizard apprentice, disappear into the night, thinking silently in his heart. Recently, there are fewer and fewer people in the tree house area. With the arrival of autumn, it even presents a bit of depression. The news of the invasion of the Black Wizard Land has caused panic everywhere. The low-level wizards living in the tree house area gritted their teeth and sold their belongings to move to the town. Because they are afraid of getting into trouble, many people choose to move secretly at night. During this period, Ronan almost woke up every day and heard that someone who lived in a certain place had left the house overnight. "Let's go," Old Wells urged Ronan in a low voice. Ronan nodded and continued to move forward. This time he walked in front of Old Wells and followed Old Wells' instructions. After walking for about 20 minutes, the 2 finally arrived at their destination. There was a bonfire in a clearing in the woods near Old Wells' house. 5 or 6 figures stood there. When they saw Ronan and the others coming, they all turned their eyes to them. "Ronan Damien." Old Wells put down the oil lamp, pulled down his hood, pointed at Ronan and introduced him to everyone. "Level 4 apprentice, is also one of us." Ronan nodded to the people around the bonfire one by one. A fat boy with short blonde hair and a little baby fat on his face said happily, "That's great. With Ronan and Linus here, our small group will be much stronger." The people around the blonde fat boy agreed with him and smiled. In addition to looking at Ronan with a faint sense of awe, their eyes also turned to the direction of another person. Ever since the conflict with the wizard Eugene with Nose Ring at the last gathering, Ronan's name has spread throughout this small treehouse area. Ronan was not surprised that someone present knew him. He was curious about another person named Linus. Following the gazes of several people, Ronan's expression suddenly changed. The man called Linus was a tall and thin young man with a cold expression. His gray hair was tied into small braids and tied behind his head, giving people a feeling of being a little arrogant. However, he also had the capital to be arrogant. This was actually a 5th-level wizard apprentice, who was not at the last gathering. There is a 5th-level apprentice in the tree house area? Old Wells can even recruit such a talent? He is quite something. Several thoughts flashed through Ronan's mind quickly. Chapter 27 Grouping. When Ronan was looking at the young Linus, the other party was also looking at him, but he just glanced at him casually and looked away. Ronan felt that this guy seemed to look down on them. But if you put yourself in his shoes, it seems really embarrassing for a 5th-level apprentice to be mixed with a group of low-level wizards of the 2nd, 3rd, or even 1st level. Linus probably didn't look closely at his own strength and thought he was at the 4th level. It might also be because he had just broken through and his fluctuating mental power had not yet completely stabilized. Almost everyone is here. Only Andre and Nicole didn't come. As half-elves, they are not used to too much contact with people. Please understand. I will convey the content to them after the meeting. Old Wales glanced at the young Linus and emphasized, Andre and Nicole are both 3rd-level apprentices, and they have very rich experience in forest reconnaissance and hunting, which is very helpful to us. After hearing the words half-elves and reconnaissance hunting experience, the frown on the young Linus's face was obviously relaxed. Ronan was surprised. He didn't expect that Old Wells would even bring the half-elf brother and sister into the group. Andre and Nicole had just learned the names of the half-elf brother and sister. Then let's officially start. Old Wells straightened his clothes and looked at everyone and said in a deep voice, the news of the invasion of the Black Wizard's land has basically been confirmed. Everyone gathered here to live a good life. In my experience, there should be a long buffer period from the start of the dispute to the official start of the invasion. Old Wells repeated his theory at the last gathering that he would temporarily live in the forest and seek shelter in the town when the crisis really started, trying to avoid the increasingly crazy price increase in the town and maximize the use of everyone's hard-earned financial resources. He also added a few benefits of living in the forest, such as not having to worry about food, and being able to avoid the internal conflicts and disputes that are constantly erupting in the current wizard gatherings. At the end, Old Wells said, Of course, staying in the treehouse area temporarily also requires certain risks, which requires all of us to actively cooperate and help each other. I think as long as we are vigilant enough, detect danger in advance, and evacuate in time, there will be no big problems. My suggestion is to divide a fixed area where everyone is, arrange people to patrol every day, and once something happens, it will be easy to rescue and warn in time. Old Wells took out a stack of parchment from his arms and distributed it to everyone. I have connected everyone's residences and made a patrol route map. Everyone can take a look and raise any opinions. If anyone joins later, I will make changes in time. Everyone looked down at the map in their hands. Ronan took a look and found that the map made by Old Wells was quite detailed. In addition to the patrol route, it also marked the safe activity area, the area not recommended to enter, the dangerous area, and all nearby water sources and food points, as well as some locations that can be used to store emergency supplies in the future. It can be seen that Old Wells has really put in a lot of effort during this period. This map uses the residence of each person in the group as a node, and Ronan's home is clearly marked on it. Ronan noticed that the point marked with Linus' residence is located closest to the town, and the whole map has a sense of being designed around it. Ronan didn't say anything. It was incredible that Old Wells could recruit a 5th-level apprentice to join the group. If he treated him the same as others, that would be really strange. There is also a manual of skills and precautions that can be used during patrols. Andre is compiling it. I will send it to everyone when the time comes. Old Wells paused and said, Next, let's make arrangements for patrols. My suggestion is that we should work in groups of 2. Old Wells was interrupted as soon as he started talking. The person who spoke was young Linus. I'm not used to being with others. I can do it alone. Linus spoke in a cold voice, with a sense of toughness that could not be refuted. Okay. Old Wells didn't say anything, just nodded and agreed. Then Linus will be in one group, I will be in one group with Venetia, the Jolins, and you will be in one group, Ronan and Jacob, and the rest will be Andre and his sister. They definitely don't want to be separated. Old Wells quickly made the groups and then looked at Ronan. It is estimated that Old Wells had already discussed the grouping with several people before, and now it mainly depends on his opinion. Ronan nodded, indicating that he had no problem. During the grouping process, he recognized everyone on the field one by one. Linus had nothing to say. Venetia was the shy girl who lived by the tree spring and now took turns with Old Wells to take care of Potter's daughter Cheryl. She was there all the time, but she didn't say a word from beginning to end. Her strength was that of a 2nd-level apprentice. The Jolins were a pair of wizard partners, both 2nd-level wizard apprentices. The man was fat and wore a pair of crystal glasses on his face. He looked a little timid, submissive, and had no opinion. The woman was much more assertive. She had asked Old Wells several questions when she was looking at the patrol route map. Jacob, who was left in the same group with Ronan, was the blonde fat guy who spoke at the beginning. He was a 2nd-level apprentice. This guy seemed very happy to be in the same group with Ronan. He kept looking at Ronan secretly, as if he wanted to come up and say hello to him but didn't dare. After the grouping was over, Old Wells said some encouraging and pep talk, and finally took out some palm-sized wooden boxes and distributed them to everyone, saying, This is a signal box. Once something happens, you just need to crush it, and others who see the signal will come immediately. Ronan played with a small wooden box in his hand, and penetrated into it with his mental power. He found that it was just filled with some black unknown powder. He had seen this thing on a stall in the wizard market. It was a small gadget for early warning invented based on potion science. Just as he was thinking about it, he suddenly heard Linus' questioning voice. Why not use the message stone? That would be faster and more convenient. Everyone couldn't help but look up at Linus when they heard what he said, and no one spoke. Ronan looked at the arrogant 5th-level wizard in front of him, and was speechless. The price of a communication rune in the market is more than 10 low-level magic stones. Except for high-level apprentices, who can afford such a high-level auxiliary magic tool as the communication stone? This guy must have forgotten that they are just low-level wizards living in the treehouse area, and they are reluctant to spend money to move to the city even when the war is about to break out. Linus soon realized the stupidity of his words, and his face was a little embarrassed. He snorted and didn't say anything else. Ronan stared at him, thinking secretly, Maybe only he who has the communication stone can make such a why not eat meat suggestion. It seems that this guy is wealthy. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Planning. After all matters were discussed, their temporary group was officially established. Everyone needed to go back and digest the content of the meeting, so they did not stay for long and left. Ronan deliberately lingered for a long time until everyone else left, leaving only him and Old Wells. Where did Linus come from? Ronan asked Old Wells directly. I don't know much. Actually, he took the initiative to find me and asked to join. Old Wells' answer surprised Ronan. He took the initiative to ask to join. Yes. Old Wells nodded and said, he heard about our last meeting and came to me. Linus doesn't look like a wandering wizard. He told me that he couldn't rent a suitable house in the town and there were too many people, so he thought of living in seclusion in the forest. This reason is not too far-fetched, but Ronan thinks there should be other reasons. Let's not talk about him. As long as he has no ill will towards us, that's fine. Ronan didn't think that a group of poor wizards in the treehouse area could have any plans for a 5th-level apprentice wizard. Avoiding this topic, Ronan asked Old Wells. Now that the team is established, what are your plans? What plans can a small 3rd-level apprentice like me have? I've only lived a few years longer than you. Old Wells smiled bitterly and said, I will continue to lobby for people to join. There are still a few people in the team now. Ronan nodded. That's right. There are only 5 groups of people in the team now. On average, they have to patrol once every 5 days. The number of times is a bit too frequent, especially for a wizard like him who likes to practice hard. Let's try it for a while. Many problems will only be exposed in practice. Our team also needs time to run in. Be prepared for someone to quit at any time. Old Wells thought much further than Ronan. Ronan asked Old Wells about the arrangement for the little girl Cheryl. When it was the turn of Old Wells and Venetia to patrol, the Kyalan couple in the team would help take care of her, so he felt relieved. By the way, after chatting, Ronan finally asked the question he wanted to know most. Can you tell me more about the black robes? Ronan's expression gradually became serious, and he said in a deep voice, I still don't know what kind of opponents we are going to face when we patrol for prevention. Old Wells was silent for a while, and slowly said, most of the black robe wizards from the Black Wizard Land have twisted temperaments and cruel methods. The power of the spells they mainly practice may not be greater than that of ordinary spells, but the way of casting spells and the effects of spells are far more bizarre and terrifying than ordinary spells. But don't worry, even among the Black Robe group, there are very few people who are qualified and capable of practicing curse spells like the one that killed Potter. The vast majority of Black Robe wizards mainly practice ordinary dark and undead spells. The problem of black robes being eroded by energy particles is much more serious than ours. It is said that even formal wizards cannot completely solve it, so many black robes are keen on body transformation. If you encounter one, be careful, their vital positions may be different from those of ordinary people. Ronan wrote down what Old Wells said one by one. These are all valuable experiences, which may save lives in the future. Are there any obvious features that can easily distinguish black-robed wizards? I see that there are many wizards in Hoddam who like to wear black robes. Ronan touched his chin and asked. Old Wells thought for a while and replied, it's the aura. Black-robed wizards will be surrounded by negative energy particles to a certain extent. You will know when you see them. You can basically feel it at once. Ronan sighed, I really hope I will never see them. Old Wells was speechless. Back in the treehouse, Ronan was still thinking about the small group and the black-robed wizards. He fully supported Old Wells's mutual aid patrol. He liked to practice hard and disliked a noisy and inconvenient town. He couldn't enter the academy for the time being, so if he didn't want to delay his practice progress, the forest was still the best place to live. The establishment of a small group can relieve him of a large part of his worries. But you can't rely on this completely. Ronan knew that Old Wells's small group might be okay at ordinary times, but once there was a slight problem, it would definitely fall apart at the touch. If you want to survive the upcoming Black Robe crisis, you still have to rely on yourself. Only when you are stronger can you have more chances to survive and live better. Ronan called up the character panel and compared the above content to start making his next training plan. In the face of crisis, the rune engraving can be put aside for a while, and the main focus is still on improving combat power. It is unlikely that the spiritual power will be greatly improved in a short period of time, so you can only start with spells. The first small goal is to raise Energy Missile to the expert level. If nothing unexpected happens, Ronan's combat power will be greatly improved at that time. Then learn the remaining 3 low-level spells in the 0-level spells to prevent emergencies. The second is Austerity Body Forging and Basic Swordsmanship. These 2 are also the focus of training. The battles at the middle and low-level wizard apprentice level are actually not as high-end as most people imagine. It is common for a few spells to be blasted at the beginning, and then both enter a long cooling period. At this time, the advantage of a strong physical body is reflected. Physical combat skills do not require spellcasting guidance, and can often quickly establish the victory of a battle. If you can master the basic swordsmanship, combined with a mastery level charge weapon, it is not impossible to instantly burst out the lethality comparable to the general 0-level intermediate spell, and there is no need for spell guidance. Ronan looked at the one-handed sword in his hand and thought to himself. The last point is the magic equipment. Ronan was planning to buy 1 or 2 attack or auxiliary magic tools, but the current market price of magic tools made him reluctantly give up this idea. 2 magic tool rings should be enough. At least it is much stronger than the average treehouse area wizard. Old Wells said that the living environment in the Black Wizard Land is harsh. Things like killing and robbing treasures can only be regarded as occasional occurrences in Hoddam, but they are commonplace in the Black Wizard Land. Therefore, many black-robed wizards in the Black Wizard Land are good at fighting, and in terms of practical experience, they are much stronger than those gray-robed wizards. This is also one of the reasons why many wizards in the Hoddam Wizard Land change color when talking about black robes. Now the news of the invasion of the Black Witch Land is like a thick dark cloud, covering the entire Hoddam. Even Ronan feels as if he is in a low-pressure environment before a storm. He feels depressed all the time, as if something is blocking him. Only hard work can alleviate it. On the second day of the formation of the small team, the daily patrol work officially started. On the first day, it was the combination of Old Wells and the socially anxious girl Lineage. The 2 patrolled near Ronan's residence, and Old Wells even stood under the tree to greet him. Chapter 29 Inspection, Gossip. The next day, it was the wizard Jolin and his wife. The couple was very good at dealing with people, and they brought Ronan gifts, which were freshly baked apple pies and lamb pies. They also enthusiastically said that he could often go to their place for meals in the future, and their flattery was beyond words. Ronan politely invited the 2 to come in for a cup of tea. After seeing the couple off, he tasted the apple pies and lamb pies they sent. He couldn't help but sigh. Compared with Mrs. Jolin's cooking, what kind of things did he usually eat? On the third day, it was the turn of the young wizard Linus. Ronan didn't see him, probably because he left without saying hello to him. The fourth day was the half-elf brother and sister. Thinking of the soft and lovely half-elf girl he saw at Potter's funeral last time, Ronan kept time and waited outside the tree house early, thinking that he could see her and feast his eyes, and maybe even talk and get to know her. As a result, after waiting for a long time, only a cold-looking half-elf man appeared, asked him a few simple questions and left, which made Ronan very disappointed. Day 5. It was finally Ronan's turn to patrol. Ring, one-handed sword, water bag, dry food. In the hut, Ronan counted the things he was going to bring one by one, and then put on the gray robe. Originally, he wanted to wear a light leather armor inside. However, due to the practice of physical training, his body shape has changed a lot, and the leather armor left by his previous body no longer fits him. Wearing it is not conducive to movement, so forget it. When he walked out of the hut, Ronan saw the blonde fat boy Jacob, who was assigned to patrol with him, waiting under the old oak tree in his home. Ronan climbed down the tree along the vines, and Jacob, who noticed the movement, quickly came to meet him. "Good morning, Lord Ronan." Jacob greeted Ronan, with a hint of excitement in his expression. "Good morning." Ronan smiled at him politely and asked casually, "Have you had breakfast?" "No." Jacob shook his head at first, and then nodded quickly. Ronan didn't bother to care whether he had eaten or not. He just asked politely and said directly, "Then let's get started." Oh. Jacob followed him closely like a follower. Ronan was quite serious about his first patrol. He took out the patrol route map drawn by Old Wells and looked at it, thinking about the next arrangement. Starting from his home, he would first go to the nearest Kiaolin couple's home, then to Old Wells' home, then to Venetia, the half-elf siblings, Linus, and all the members of the group's residences one by one, plus patrolling the activity area, checking the water source, and the material storage point. After the whole process, with his pace, it should take 2 hours to complete. But if he took Jacob with him, Ronan glanced at the blonde fat boy who was following closely beside him and whose breathing had begun to increase after walking for a while. It will probably take more than 3 hours. Okay. I probably don't have to do anything today. Ronan shook his head and sighed in his heart. In fact, the team did not stipulate how many times each group of people had to patrol each time, nor did they have fixed route requirements. But patrolling is a matter of luck, and no one knows when and where a situation will suddenly occur, so Ronan thought it would be better to be diligent. To be responsible for everyone and himself. His initial plan was to run the map at least 3 times a day, once in the morning, afternoon, and evening. If everything goes well, he should be able to squeeze out some time to do his own things. Ronan thought as he walked, and unknowingly came to the first patrol point, the residence of the Kiaolin couple. The Kiaolin couple's treehouse was built in the middle of 2 trees, and it looked much bigger than Ronan's from the outside. The 2 of them made a special visit last time, and out of courtesy, Ronan decided to go up and say hello to them. Unexpectedly, the couple seemed to have expected him to come, waiting at the door early, and welcomed them in with an extremely warm attitude, and entertained them. This was Ronan's first official visit to another wizard's home. He felt a little embarrassed that he didn't bring any gifts, so he sat down and drank a simple cup of black tea before getting up and saying goodbye. Jacob, who claimed to have had breakfast, ate and took away a whole plate of raspberry pies that Mrs. Kiaolin had just baked, and he was still burping when he left. Ronan was speechless. Perhaps he felt that he was a little familiar with Ronan, and after leaving the Kiaolin couple's house, the fat boy Jacob took the initiative to talk to Ronan. Lord Ronan, I heard that you are a rune master. Yes. Ronan nodded casually. This was not a secret, and he had never deliberately concealed it. It's amazing. Jacob exclaimed, looking at Ronan with undisguised respect and admiration in his eyes. In the treehouse area, I have never seen a genius rune master as young as you who became a 4th level wizard. Haha. Ronan smiled and did not respond. Jacob flattered twice more, and suddenly asked cautiously, Lord Ronan, do you have a teacher or inheritance? Ronan glanced at Jacob. Why do you ask? Because Lord Linus is like that. Jacob answered without thinking. Lord Linus's teacher was a senior wizard apprentice. After his death, he left everything to Lord Linus. Ronan was startled and subconsciously asked, where did you get this news? Madame Barbara, a very beautiful female wizard, originally lived over there. Jacob pointed in a direction and said, half a month ago, she kicked out several of her previous lovers and became Lord Linus' mistress. After Jacob finished speaking, he seemed to realize that he had spoken out of turn, and hurriedly covered his mouth. Ronan, on the other hand, was suddenly enlightened. No wonder that guy's so arrogant, and he's already level 5 at such a young age. It turns out that he inherited the mantle of a high-level wandering wizard. Ronan couldn't help but ask Jacob if he knew the reason why the young wizard Linus moved to the treehouse area. At this moment, Jacob hesitated and refused to explain clearly. However, Ronan guessed that Linus, who would even brag about his wealth to his bedmate, was probably caught by some people with bad intentions because the news of his inheritance as a high-level wizard apprentice had leaked out. Or he was simply forced by his enemies. The secret about Linus that Jacob accidentally revealed piqued Ronan's interest, and he began to take the initiative to chat with Jacob. Unexpectedly, Jacob was really a talent. Although his strength and talent were average, his ability to get gossip was indeed first class. He knew everything about the wizards in a large area nearby. What about which wizard is secretly having an affair with which wizard? What about which wizard's son is not his own? What about the 2 wizards' shocking sexual orientation? Not only do they often meet secretly, but they always bring a billy goat with them. Ronan was amazed. If it weren't for Jacob, he wouldn't have known that the wizard life in the treehouse area was so exciting. He even learned that when Old Wells was young, he had a daughter, but unfortunately she died young. He took good care of Venetia, who lived by the tree spring, and treated her as his own daughter. Time passed quickly under Jacob's endless gossip. Unfortunately, By the second half of the patrol, Jacob gradually closed his mouth because of exhaustion, which made Ronan feel unsatisfied. Pushing aside the thick dead branches and fallen leaves, Ronan carefully checked the things in the small tree hole in front of him. Food, several packets of hemostatic powder for treating external injuries, a bottle of the lowest level antidote, and a brand new signal box that had never been used. Old Wells really put a lot of effort into it. Ronan covered himself again inside in his heart. Chapter 32 Months. The material point was set up to prevent the small group members from getting injured or poisoned during the patrol, or encountering danger, but the signal box was damaged. The main purpose was to just in case. Although the things inside were not valuable, they were very practical and could indeed save lives in some extreme cases. It must be said that it was reassuring to have someone like Old Wells around. An old man in the family is like a treasure, that's right. Ronan finished his routine inspection and turned around to see Jacob lying on an old tree root, tired like a dog. This guy's physical fitness was too poor, just like when he first crossed over. He was almost exhausted before he finished this patrol. Forget it, Ronan said sympathetically, because this guy had told him gossip all the way. I'll finish the next work by myself, you go back and rest quickly. Is this appropriate, Lord Ronan? Jacob panted and spoke a little embarrassedly, but his face showed obvious intention. Ronan was too lazy to say more, so he waved at him and walked forward. The next point is. Ronan glanced at the map, his expression slightly changed. The map showed that he was close to the residence of the half-elf siblings. Ronan walked there with some expectation. The place where the half-elf siblings lived was quite remote, and there were lush and dense bushes and weeds nearby. Ronan also found several man-made traps on the way. Fortunately, he had a strong physical fitness and quick reaction, so he didn't fall into them. There was no doubt that it was set by the half-elf siblings. It was not easy to see the shadow of the tree house from a distance, and there was still time to get close. Swoosh, a sharp sound of breaking through the air suddenly sounded, and Ronan's scalp was slightly numb, and he instinctively dodged to the side. Duck, a dark black arrow suddenly pierced the trunk of a tree next to him, the arrowhead deeply embedded, and the white tail feathers were still vibrating at high speed. Damn it! Ronan turned his head with an ugly expression and saw the direction from which the arrow came. A tall figure hidden in the shadow of the tree was slowly putting down the bow in his hand. Before he could speak, a cold and rough voice floated over from afar. No need to patrol around here, we can handle it ourselves. Under the robe, Ronan tightened and loosened his hand on the hilt of the one-handed sword, and finally put it down slowly with a gloomy face, turned around and retreated from the forest. Thinking of the scene when they first met, Ronan took a deep breath and cursed fiercely. Psychopath. Only then did he feel a little better. After a simple circle around Jacob's house, Ronan rushed to the last residence of Linus. As soon as he arrived, Ronan saw Linus sitting on the grass at the bottom of the tree drinking tea, and a plump woman leaned against him. The two were talking together, and from a distance, the woman kept making cluck, cluck laughter like a hen. Linus noticed Ronan's appearance from a distance, but just cast a cold look and no longer paid attention. Ronan would not put his warm face on others' cold buttocks, so he turned around and left directly. Except for the patrol in the morning, Jacob followed half of the way, and the remaining 2 times were completed independently by Ronan. After a day, he was not tired, but he felt that it was tedious and time-consuming. But since he had decided to join, there was nothing to complain about. 2 months later. Buzz, Ronan opened his lips slightly, and uttered an unknown syllable, shaking the air. The next second, a large area of light in front of him was distorted, and a dark blue and almost black ball of light, as big as a watermelon, condensed out of thin air, and then flew out with a whistling sound. The ball of light slid across the lake, breaking the blue mirror-like lake surface. The dark blue ball of light dragged a long white water wave on the lake surface. When it was about to reach the center of the lake, it exploded with a boom, exploding waves and water columns more than 10 meters high. Ronan stared at his character panel. After a moment, his face showed helpless disappointment. It still doesn't work. In 2 months, Ronan had already trained the expert level, energy missile, to the top. But he just couldn't get past the last bit of proficiency to break through the expert level. It's not enough. I've cast the spell so many times. Why is the accumulated perception still not enough? Ronan frowned. He could feel that the energy missile was only a thin layer of window paper away from breaking through to the next level, but he was always just a little bit short of breaking through this layer of window paper. I can only continue to grind slowly. At least the expert level, energy missile, is much more powerful than before. Ronan comforted himself, turned around, and walked towards the forest. Hoddam was already in autumn at this time. Walking on the slightly yellow grass, looking into the distance, under the orange sunset, the vast forest was undulating, gradually changing to dark green and golden. The picture was as beautiful as an oil painting. It was a pity that under this beautiful picture, it was evolving into more and more violent turbulence and chaos. Walking into the forest on the thick fallen leaves, Ronan suddenly stopped after a while. He slowly walked towards a pile of fallen leaves. When he got closer, he picked up a dead branch and gently moved it. After a while, a pale and twisted female corpse appeared from under the fallen leaves. It should have been less than 2 days since the person died, and the body was not swollen yet. The woman was naked, and everything on her body was stripped off. Judging from the purple scars all over her neck and collarbone, it was estimated that she had been humiliated before her death. The woman's face was twisted in pain and despair, and her gray eyes stared at Ronan, as if silently accusing something. Ronan was silent, picked up the dead leaves on the ground and covered the woman's face again, then gently raised his hand. The red ring on the ring finger of his right hand flashed slightly, and the next second a red fireball was born and flew out quickly. The pile of dead leaves and the female corpse in it turned into a blazing fire. May the truth guide you, and your soul stay in the land of peace forever. Ronan muttered in a low voice, uttering the syllables of the spell. Before the fire was about to spread to the surroundings, he raised his hand to summon a frost ball with a chilling air and threw it out. Crack! The ice ball exploded, and the rolling cold air condensed the remaining flames and the ashes in the flames into frost. After doing all this, Ronan turned and left. This was the third body Ronan had seen in the forest. Since last month, the chaotic situation in Hoddam has become increasingly uncontrollable. Exaggerated prices, strong uneasiness, anxious intense atmosphere, and more frequent news about the appearance of black-robed wizards. Many wizards who have spent all their savings and wandered in despair became anxious and began to kill and rob. The town living area has a wizard from the academy in charge, and the order's barely maintained. But in the wild area that is not a safe area, the situation seems a bit worse. Fights happen every day, even Ronan has encountered one. Half a month ago, he went to the town to sell runes, and on the way back, he encountered a group of robbers. Fortunately, there was no danger, because the people were busy at the time and had no time to care about him. This is when the benefits of being in a group are revealed. Because people nearby already know that many of them are wizards who stick together, and Linus even killed 2 third-level wizard apprentices who had a conflict with him during a single patrol, showing the powerful strength of a mid-level apprentice, so famous that wizards in the forest area all know that there is a 5th-level apprentice in their group. However, the forest has become more and more chaotic recently, and almost no one has left the treehouse area. Old Wells and his friends have discussed and planned to move to the town to live together in the near future. Chapter 31 Detection and the Magic Swordsman. Fortunately, I have saved up a lot of magic stones during this period. Even if the prices in the town are ridiculously high now, I should be able to hold on for a while. Ronan thought to himself, and then clicked on his character panel. Name, Ronan Damien. Age, 16. Talent, no attribute affinity. Strength, level 5 wizard apprentice, 5%. Skills, basic meditation, expert 219/800. Energy missile, expert 799/800. Charged weapon, mastery 342/400. Rune marking, cleaning, proficient 177, 200. Shining, proficient 27/200. Protection, entry 13 out of 100. Ascetic body forging, mastery 101/400. Basic swordsmanship, mastery 388/400. Fireball, entry 10 out of 100. Ice ball, entry 20 out of 100. Detection, proficient 5/200. Compared with 2 months ago, Ronan's panel information has changed again. He learned 3 more low-level 0-level spells, the remaining 3 in the spellbook. He didn't spend too much time on the offensive, Fireball, and Ice Ball, just getting started. He practiced the only auxiliary spell, Detection, among the 5 low-level 0-level spells to a proficient level. Eye of Peeping Truth Ronan chanted in a low voice, and as his mental power surged, a faint white light appeared in his eyes. The release of detection is very simple, and almost no hand gestures are required, but its effect is also limited. It can only detect some breaths that cannot be captured by the naked eye, the traces of energy particles condensed after the spell is released, and a detection of the strength of other wizards, but there is a certain probability of failure. Detection can be regarded as making up for some of his shortcomings in reconnaissance methods. In 2 months, Ronan's mental power has hardly increased, only 4% more than before. The sole qualification of this body is really poor. Even the expert level, basic meditation, can't save it. At this rate, it would take Ronan 4 years to advance from a 5th level apprentice to a 6th level apprentice. The further one advances on the path of a wizard, the more difficult it becomes. If he doesn't take drugs later, Ronan estimates that he may not be able to break through to the realm of a formal wizard even if he spends his entire life. Even reaching the 9th level apprentice is a big problem. Because most of his energy was spent on hard training, Ronan's rune engraving skill proficiency increased moderately. The clean rune is still at the proficient level, and the shining rune barely passed the entry level. However, he successfully studied the 0-level intermediate protection rune. Now the price of the protection rune in the market has risen to nearly 20 low-level magic stones per piece. Even if my success rate of engraving the protection rune is a little lower, I still make more money than before. Ronan now has more than a dozen protection runes on hand. He wants to wait until the price reaches its peak before making a move. The invasion of the Black Witch Land has not officially begun. When the real fighting begins, a large number of magic tools will be lost, especially protective magic tools. That is when the protection rune will be in short supply and most valuable. Now the major workshops in the market are buying up all kinds of low and medium level runes. Ronan now thinks back and thinks carefully. These shops and workshops probably received the news of the Black Witch Land's imminent invasion from the Academy a long time ago, and had already arranged it privately. This can also explain why his first trip to the Welling workshop to sell runes went so smoothly. However, these workshops are not targeting the rune stone business. Most of them have their own forgers and enchanters, and they want to stock up on finished magic tools. In the past 2 months, Ronan has been practicing hard day and night, but the energy missile is stuck at a certain level, and the level of body forging is also stuck. In fact, the practice of body forging was quite smooth at the beginning. With the help of magic beast meat, the proficiency increased rapidly. But when he broke through the mastery and practiced austerity body forging to the 5th posture, Ronan really couldn't practice it anymore. His body could bear it, but his willpower really couldn't. During the practice, the pain that penetrated deep into his bones almost made Ronan lose control of his bowels and bladder several times. If my mental power doesn't break through, it will be difficult for me to continue to make progress in austerity bodybuilding. Eating monster meat every day won't help. Ronan felt that the effect of monster meat can only be said to speed up the speed of bodybuilding. The key to determining the upper limit of the progress of austerity bodybuilding is still willpower. Although mental power and willpower are not completely linked, if the mental power is strong enough, people will still be more tolerant of pain. At least they won't faint from the pain or lose control of their bodies. Why bother yourself so much? In my previous life, I was even afraid of having blood drawn and injections. I'll practice again when my mental power is improved, or look for a potion that can enhance pain tolerance. Ronan walked to a clearing in the forest covered with thick fallen leaves, stopped, and slowly pulled out the one-handed sword at his waist. Looking back, the biggest gains in these 2 months were the basic swordsmanship, and the charge weapon that he added every time he practiced swordsmanship. One was from entry level to being proficient, and the other was about to be promoted to expert. Ronan chanted in a low voice, and gently brushed the blade of the one-handed sword with his left hand, and a layer of overflowing light attached to it. When the originally ordinary silver one-handed longsword became radiant, Ronan began to move. Squeak! The sword pierced directly in the air with a tearing sound, and the sword body slashed horizontally, bringing up a fierce airflow. The fallen leaves on the ground were quickly rolled up and then torn into pieces, like a group of dancing deadleaf butterflies, fluttering around. The moves Ronan practiced were very ordinary, but the connection between the sword moves was extremely smooth and natural, and he was as skilled as those senior adventurers who had been addicted to the way of chivalry for many years and even had to hold the big sword when sleeping. The sword skills that Ronan practiced were simple in themselves, and it was easier to practice after forming muscle memory in the body. As his proficiency increased, his understanding of this sword technique also continued to deepen. After each practice, his sword techniques would be constantly modified in a direction that was more in line with his personal habits. After practicing for a while, Ronan felt a little hot, so he took off his robe, revealing a strong and perfect body. Every time he swung his sword, the muscles of his arms, shoulders, chest, abdomen and thighs would move with him. The subcutaneous muscles would rise and fall like water waves, and sweat would flow down, showing the beauty of masculine wildness. Bang! Ronan shook his wrist, and the streamer attached to the one-handed longsword exploded, directly throwing out a white airwave visible to the naked eye. A big pit was directly blown up in the grass in front of him, and two large trees that were unfortunately affected fell down with a creaking sound, and leaves were scattered all over the sky. Huh? Ronan exhaled a breath of foul air, put away his long sword, and glanced at the mess all around him. A sense of accomplishment arose in his heart. Even a normal level 0 intermediate protective magic tool may not be able to block my magic sword energy. The enchanted energy particle explosion effect of charge weapon, coupled with Ronan's terrifying physical strength, is indeed quite amazing, almost as powerful as energy missile when he first entered the expert level. The key is that there is no need to do any casting guidance. Charge weapon can cast in advance, and the effect of charge weapon at the master level can last for about 5 minutes. An apprentice wizard who has not undergone physical transformation is just like an ordinary person. As long as you can close the distance and attack before the opponent's spell guidance is completed, the advanced apprentice will probably die under the sword. Of course, the premise is that the opponent does not have any active protective magic tools on him. Is this a new profession that combines wizards and knights, a magic swordsman? Ronan thought, lowered his head to check the longsword in his hand, and reached out to touch the fine cracks on the sword. It's a pity that the material of this sword is a bit poor. It has been damaged so much by practicing alone. I'm afraid it will be completely scrapped after 2 actual battles. Chapter 32 Black Robe. Ronan planned to find a blacksmith to forge a better longsword after moving to the town. Without enchantment, the price should not be too expensive. He rubbed the longsword on his trouser leg, wiped off the dust, and put the one-handed sword back on his waist. He picked up the robe on the ground and put it on. Compared with a few months ago, Ronan now seemed to be a different person, and he had completely completed the gorgeous transformation from a wretched fat man to a sunny and handsome man. His height soared to 1.85 meters, with handsome looks and slender figure. His long chestnut curly hair was scattered on his shoulders, and there seemed to be a sharpness in his lake blue eyes. If he took off the robe, there would definitely be a lot of people who believed that he had been practicing knighthood since he was a child. Let's go home. Ronan calculated the time and it had been a while since he came out, so he prepared to go home. The treehouse area is now in a mess, with robberies and murders happening one after another, not to mention the burglary of Lalu. Thefts happen every day. Although Ronan has hidden most of his valuables in a secret place, he still feels a little uneasy when he's not around for a long time. It only takes Ronan 3 to 5 minutes to get from the lakeside forest to his residence. Rustle. Ronan had just walked for a while when he suddenly heard a series of small noises coming from the bushes next to him. He stopped and immediately became alert. Swoosh! A white-lipped deer jumped out of a bush in front of Ronan, without even looking at him, and disappeared into another bush. Before he could come to his senses, goats, foxes, rabbits, small animals ran past Ronan one after another, looking panicked, as if they were being chased by some terrible natural enemy. Ronan's first reaction was that there were wizards fighting nearby again. Recently, the forest has been in turmoil. From time to time, wizards would perform spells to fight each other, causing the small animals that were preparing to store food for the winter to move around every now and then. He had seen similar scenes more than once or twice. Ronan stood there, intending to wait for the waves of animals in front of him to run away. But after waiting for a while, he found that the rustling sounds in the jungle became more and more frequent, and the animals running in an endless stream, and their sizes were getting bigger and bigger. Something is wrong. What kind of movement can cause such a large number of wild animals to flee? Ronan vaguely felt an unusual atmosphere. His expression was slightly condensed, and he stopped waiting and forced his way through the fleeing wild animals from one side. The further he went, the more obvious the uneasy feeling in his heart became, and his steps became faster and faster. Swoosh, passing through the dense bushes, Ronan came to an open and bright open space. He rushed, stepped on a tall tree trunk in a few steps, and climbed to the top of the tree with agility. Taking advantage of the height of the tree, he looked around and looked into the distance. Instantly, Ronan's pupils contracted, and he froze on the tree. In the vast and dense forest, thick black smoke was seen floating around. Countless birds were circling over the forest and flying everywhere. In the distance, there were faint explosions and roars, accompanied by the screams and roars of people or animals. The whole scene was filled with smoke. Ronan's face darkened little by little, looking at the signal smoke that was near or far. At this time, he could no longer tell who released these signals. In the forest, there were more than one wandering wizard groups like them, and the effects of the signal boxes used for rescue and early warning were similar. Black robe. The word slowly emerged in Ronan's mind, and his heartbeat began to accelerate slowly. When the things he had been worried about for a long time finally became a reality one day, Ronan unexpectedly found that he was not too nervous and panicked, but instead felt an urge to try. Taking a deep breath, Ronan grabbed the hilt of the one-handed sword at his waist, then chose a signal-sending location closest to him and rushed over quickly. In a messy forest clearing, a war between wizards was going on. 7 or 8 gray-robed wizards in various robes were working together to besiege a black-robed wizard with a cold and gloomy face and a strong cold aura. The gray-robed wizards had a huge advantage in numbers, but the situation on the scene was just the opposite. The black-robed wizard holding a gray bone staff controlled a tall and burly flesh monster that seemed to be stitched together with a large number of corpses, while chanting in a low voice, calmly leading the direction of the battle situation. The black-robed wizard uttered evil and strange spell syllables from his dark lips, and shook the staff in his hand lightly, and a dark green ball of light suddenly shot out. A middle-aged gray-robed man with a sallow face was unable to dodge and was hit directly by the dark green light ball. The next second, the middle-aged gray-robed man screamed miserably. The moment the dark green light ball landed on him, it immediately turned into a pool of sticky and disgusting green liquid, and then quickly corroded his flesh and blood into smoke. In just a few breaths, the middle-aged gray-robed man was corroded into a pool of pus and blood and fell to the ground. Bernie, the gray-robed men standing next to the middle-aged gray-robed man, all showed pity on their faces when they saw his miserable state. A plump female wizard couldn't stand this huge simulation, and even bent down and vomited violently. Roar! A creepy and strange roar sounded in the field, and the flesh and blood monster made of corpses roared and strode towards the crowd. The gray-robed wizards turned pale and retreated one after another, except for a burly figure wearing black leather armor and holding a big sword who took the initiative to meet him. The burly figure flashed with white light, and collided fiercely with the flesh monster, making a huge and dull sound. Half-elf knight. The black-robed wizard stared at the burly figure holding a big sword for a while, then ignored it and turned his attention to the other gray-robed ones. He gently waved a bone staff in his hand, his lips moved quickly, and soon another dark green light ball was summoned. This time, the gray-robed side flew out several spells in time. But these spells were almost all over one after another, and they barely offset the dark green light ball. This guy is a 6th level apprentice. A young man with a thin face and gray hair tied into small braids said with an unpleasant expression. So we can only rely on you. In the gray robe, a half-elf wizard with pointed ears and delicate features stared at the black robe and said in a deep voice, "Only you have the ability to hurt him. The rest of us will help you buy time. Linus, you should have learned the intermediate spell of level 0, right?" "Of course." The gray-haired young man who was attacked by Linus snorted, his face gloomy, and he closed his eyes and began to focus on the guidance before casting the spell. Under the command of the beautiful half-elf wizard, the remaining gray-robed wizards took out their few means of attack and threw them at the black robe. Unfortunately, these gray-robed wizards, who generally only have the strength of 2nd or 3rd level apprentices, did their best to cast spells with little power, and few of them could pose a threat to the black-robed wizards. On the other hand, the black robes would throw a spell from time to time, which was like a disaster for the gray robes. Chapter 33 Cruel. Another dark green corrosive light ball, a fat man in a gray robe with sparse hair and crystal glasses was unable to dodge and was hit on the arm by the dark green light ball. Before the man could react, a fat woman standing next to him screamed in fear. The beautiful half-elf wizard rushed forward, took out a dagger from her bosom and quickly slashed at the man. Blood splattered, an arm corroded to the point of bone fell to the ground, and the man holding the wound rolled on the ground in pain. Kialin. The fat woman rushed over with red eyes, hugged the man and cried with heartache. The handsome face of the half-elf wizard showed some reluctance, and turned to look in the direction of Linus. Seeing that the latter was still in a low chanting state, a trace of worry flashed across his face. At this time, an inexplicable energy wave spread out from the field. The half-elf wizard looked up and saw that the black-robed wizard in the middle of the open space was slowly raising his staff. The staff, which seemed to be made of several skulls, emitted a faint cold light. The half-elf wizard's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly picked up his staff and recited a spell. At the same time, Linus, who had been concentrating on casting spells with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. A powerful energy field wave that was almost as strong as that of the black-robed wizard came from him, and Linus' eyes bloomed with an icy blue light, and his robes also fluttered. Finally, a hint of joy flashed in the half-elf wizard's eyes. But when he found the target of Linus' spell, his face changed. Linus. Don't aim at him. Get rid of his puppet first. The half-elf wizard shouted directly without even caring about the spell that was about to be completed. However, Linus, who was shrouded in a powerful aura, just glanced at him coldly, and then continued to cast spells towards the set target. Frost Ray. Icy blue air currents surged on Linus's arm, converging into a white point between his 5 fingers, and then a blue-white beam of light as thick as an arm suddenly shot out. When the blue-white beam of light shot out, the temperature in the field dropped sharply. With Linus as the center, a large amount of cold air escaped, and large areas of grass were frozen and covered with a thick layer of white frost. Seeing the blue-white frost ray shooting straight towards the position of the black-robed wizard, the half-elf wizard gritted his teeth and yelled, "Nicole!" The sword-wielding figure who was fighting with the flesh monster heard this call, and a ball of white light suddenly burst out of his body. He struggled to break free from the flesh monster and turned to pounce on the black-robed wizard not far away. 2 forces, one blue and one white, hit the black robe in the middle of the field almost at the same time, and the figure of the black-robed wizard was quickly submerged by the strong light. Linus put down his hand and stumbled back a few steps. It was obvious that the spellcasting just now was also a big burden for him as a level 5 apprentice. Now he was almost exhausted. "Linus, you are so handsome." The plump female wizard beside him supported him in time and offered a kiss. Her face, which was still quite pretty, was full of intoxication and admiration. Linus smiled palely, and a bit of pride flashed between his eyebrows. While enjoying the admiration of the female companion beside him, his eyes subconsciously glanced at the half-elf wizard not far away. However, this joy did not stay in the field for long, and there was a click. The burly figure holding the big sword was shocked by a force and groaned backwards, and was entangled by the flesh and blood monster again. The black-robed wizard, who was just completely covered by frost, had now reappeared under the large pieces of cracked ice. He still kept the staff raised high, and a layer of translucent black light shield protected him in the middle, leaving him unscathed. The black-robed wizard had a thick mockery on his pale and gloomy face, and the ground around his feet was clean without any frost. "What?" Seeing this scene, Linus, who was proud and calm in the last second, changed color in the next second, and his expression suddenly became extremely ugly. The female companion beside him was also stunned, subconsciously letting go of Linus's hand, and retreated with a pale face, fear spreading in her eyes again. How could the black robe of a 6th-level apprentice not have corresponding protective measures? The half-elf wizard seemed to have expected this scene, muttering to himself, and when he noticed the faint light blooming on the staff in the black-robed wizard's hand, his delicate face finally couldn't help but show a deep helplessness and bitterness. "It's over now." Buzz! The black-robed wizard raised his staff high, and a faint green light quickly bloomed from the top of the staff, spreading to the surroundings, and in an instant, all the gray robes were covered. The gray robes in the range of the green light suddenly felt a strong sense of weakness from the bottom of their hearts, their hands and feet became weak, and their bodies collapsed to the ground uncontrollably. The burly figure who was fighting back and forth with the flesh and blood monster was also thrown out fiercely in the next second. Looking at the gray-robed wizards who collapsed to the ground one by one, the black-robed wizard sneered disdainfully, and pointed his staff casually, and the flesh and blood monster under his hand roared and strode towards Linus. Linus, who was the first to be locked, turned pale and tried to support himself to retreat, but he was in a weak force field and it was difficult for him to even stand up, let alone escape. Seeing the terrifying flesh and blood monster getting closer and closer, Linus panicked and looked around for something to help him. Suddenly seeing the female wizard next to him, Linus' eyes flashed with ruthlessness, and he mustered up all his strength to kick her shoulder. The plump female wizard was caught off guard, screaming and rolling in front of the flesh monster, and then was directly crushed by the flesh monster's head, and her scream stopped abruptly. The flesh monster kept moving, and Linus finally trembled with fear. The rest of the gray robes on the field were chilled and angry, but more of them were desperate. After the black robes dealt with Linus, it would be their turn next. "Conrad, my little baby, enjoy your lunch." The black robe wizard smiled and strolled leisurely in the field. His eyes slid back and forth between the two half-elves, as if he was thinking about something in his mind, and his eyes kept flashing. Crack! The flesh monster that caught Linus violently tore off one of his arms and put it directly into his mouth to chew. Linus' screams resounded throughout the open space, and despair spread further among the crowd. However, at this moment, whoosh, a violent sound of breaking through the air suddenly came from a distance, approaching quickly, accompanied by an extremely strong energy particle fluctuation. The black-robed wizard who was thinking was instantly alert and turned his head to look in the direction of the sound and fluctuation. The next second, his pupils suddenly shrank. I saw a blue-black energy light ball as big as a watermelon, close to the ground, whistling all the way. Wherever it passed, large pieces of grass were lifted up and shredded. The violent and fierce momentum was like a hurricane. The black-robed wizard had no time to react, so he could only roar in a hoarse voice, "Conrad!" The flesh and blood monster that was eating threw away Linus in his hand, rushed up with a few big steps, and used his broad and huge body to firmly block the black robe. Boom! The blue-black light ball hit the flesh and blood monster and exploded. The latter didn't even have time to make a sound before it was blown into pieces of flesh and blood by the violent energy flow. Thanks to the leader of the Pumpkin Brother who won't run away, thank you. Chapter 34 Storage Waste Bag, Ronan himself. Zero Order Advanced Energy Spell. Senior Wizard Apprentice. The black-robed wizard reached out and wiped the blood that splashed on his face. He didn't care about the death of his flesh and blood servant. There was a deep throbbing and fear in his eyes. He ran in the opposite direction of the spell without any hesitation. He was completely different from the way he had been facing so many gray-robed people with ease and calmness before. However, before he could run 2 steps, the life-threatening sound of breaking through the air sounded again. So fast. The black-robed wizard turned his head subconsciously, and saw a terrifying blue-black light ball that was no less powerful than the previous one, and even felt slightly larger. It attacked again. The speed of the blue-black energy light ball was so fast that the black-robed wizard had no time to dodge. The protective shield that could only be quickly propped up with magic tools had a ferocious expression and gnashed his teeth as he roared, "2 senior apprentices teamed up to deal with a mere level 6 like me, and they also wanted to sneak attack you wizards in the Grey Wizard Land. Are all the wizards so shameless?" Bang! The black-robed wizard collided with a blue-black energy ball. The ball of light exploded, and a big pit appeared directly on the soft grass. With a crisp sound of something breaking, the black-robed wizard was thrown out by the shock wave of the explosion like a kite with a broken string. His black robe was torn and tattered, and his whole body was emitting a faint green smoke and covered with wounds. In front of the zero-level high-level spell, the protective power of the intermediate-level protective magic tools was not enough. Large streams of blood oozed from the mouth and nose of the black-robed wizard, and his internal organs were almost all broken. But he still managed to hold on for a breath and tried to look up. He wanted to see what kind of despicable villains the 2 senior apprentice wizards who killed him were. It would be even better if he had the chance to spit blood foam on their faces. At this time, many gray robes who had just escaped from the weak force field were also in a daze. The main reason was that the situation changed too quickly and they hadn't reacted yet. The black-robed wizard who was evil and powerful, dominating the battlefield and killing them in the last second, was directly bombarded to death by 2 terrifying light balls that flew from nowhere in the next second, and had no ability to resist at all. From the tone of the black-robed wizard, it seemed that 2 senior wizard apprentices came at once. Although I don't know why 2 senior wizard apprentices suddenly ran to this remote treehouse area, there is no doubt that they have survived this time. Everyone stared at the direction where the light ball flew. Under the black-robed wizard's unwilling humiliation and the gray-robed wizard's expectant eyes, finally, a figure strode out of the forest. The one who came was a young boy with a handsome face. With one step, his tall and slender figure under the gray robe closed the distance between them. In a few breaths, he was close to everyone. As the boy walked, he stretched out his right hand, and a huge blue-black ball of light was suspended. The high-pressure energy field around the ball of light formed an invisible and violent airflow in the air, blowing up the boy's chestnut hair and the hem of his gray robe, and a strong and domineering aura spread out. Then, the moment they saw the boy's appearance, the gray-robed wizards on the field were awe-stunned, their mouths opened uncontrollably, as if they couldn't believe their eyes at all. Luo Ronan. The black-robed wizard lying on the ground was also unwilling to believe it. He tried desperately to prop himself up, and tried to look behind the boy, muttering to himself repeatedly, "Impossible. How could it be possible? How could a level 5 apprentice release such a powerful spell? There are people hiding behind you, right? Come out, I see you." Boom. Ronan pressed down the energy missile in his hand, and the blue-black energy ball expanded rapidly, quickly engulfing the black-robed wizard who was mumbling something. The energy missile of the half-step expert level was so powerful that it directly blew a huge deep pit on the ground, and the ground under his feet shook violently. Seeing that the black-robed wizard had no bones left, Ronan secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He clearly remembered what old Wells had said to him. The black-robed wizard group was like the evil sects in the martial arts novels of the previous life. If you don't kill them cleanly and thoroughly, they might take advantage of their last breath to come up with some weird means to disgust you. This shattered body is definitely a death. But Ronan couldn't help but regret it the next second. It was blown to pieces, and all the magic tools and equipment on the black-robed wizard were blown away. If I had known, I would have used the sword to make the last blow. Ronan searched around the pit and barely found a tattered waste bag from the debris on the ground. He didn't expect to find anything good in it, but when he touched it, storage waste bag, Ronan's heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and his chest was instantly filled with great surprise. The storage waste bag with a space rune attribute is an extremely special type of magic tool. Even the lowest level one can be worth a lot of money. Even if there is nothing in the waste bag, this storage waste bag itself is already a huge gain. Ronan calmly stuffed the storage waste bag into his robe, and then he made time to check the situation of everyone on the field. There were a total of 7 people, 2 dead and 2 injured. It was worse than he expected when he came, but it was much better than his worst plan. The 2 wizards who died were named Bunil and Barbara. One of them was Linus's follower, and the other was Linus' bed partner. They both joined the group in the past 2 months. Ronan was not familiar with them, and his heart was not moved by their deaths. However, Mr. Jolin of the Jolin couple lost an arm, which made Ronan sympathize with him for a while. Although the Jolin couple chose to depend on Linus a long time ago, he had eaten the apple pie and meat pie they sent after all. After Ronan asked about the situation of everyone, the grey robes looked at him strangely. It was a complex look that combined shock, fear, respect, disbelief and other emotions. It was as if until now, they were fortunate to meet the real Ronan. Before this, the embroidered pillow who had a little talent as a rune master and relied on drugs to get to the intermediate apprentice level, but did not have the corresponding strength, was a completely different person. Now the handsome, powerful, mysterious boy standing in front of them, exuding the calm temperament of a strong wizard, is the real Ronan. "You are so good at hiding." Ronan seemed to read this sentence from Linus' eyes. However, after looking at him, this guy immediately lowered his head in panic, deeply hiding the embarrassment and jealousy in his eyes. Ronan looked at Linus, who had lost an arm like Mr. Kiao Lin, and his face was pale and shaky, and he sneered in his heart. He just learned the details of the battle from others, and he was looking at Linus with new eyes. Middle dot. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 Brothers and Sisters, Rookies. Before this, Ronan simply hated Linus. This guy was very arrogant and always felt that he was superior to the wizards in the treehouse area. Even though they were both level 5, Linus always showed an inexplicable sense of superiority in front of him. This sense of superiority almost reached its peak after he killed 2 level 3 apprentice wizards in one fell swoop during his solo patrol, became famous in one battle, and was attached to and admired by many low-level wizards. I used to think that this guy was just annoying, but now I know that he is so cruel, selfish and mean. Even if he is a sex partner, he has feelings for me after a few months. He killed me just like that, tisk tisk. If Linus died after doing such a thing, most people would spit on him when talking about him. Now that he is not dead, he is immediately excluded from the group by others. Everyone looks at him with indifference, and under the indifference, there is also undisguised disgust and contempt. After Ronan learned about the whole process of the battle between everyone and the black-robed wizard, his eyes naturally turned to the strongest half-elf brother and sister on the field. Looking at the beautiful half-elf wizard girl with delicate features in front of him, his tone could not help but soften. To be honest, he admired this girl. Calm, smart, and courageous. She has excellent leadership skills. Although her chest is a little small, she is not a vase at all. It's really rare. Nicole, right. There is no news about Old Wells, Venetia, and Jacob. I have to go find them again. Next, you and your brother Andre will be responsible for leading everyone to the town. I believe you can do a good job. Ronan said to the half-elf wizard girl with full appreciation and encouragement. The half-elf wizard girl also agreed readily. No problem. Her voice was not the kind of delicate voice of ordinary girls, but neutral and full of magnetism. Ronan's favorability towards the half-elf wizard girl suddenly soared again. But after the half-elf wizard's sister took over the task assigned by Ronan, her expression suddenly became a little hesitant. Ronan asked, "What? Is there anything else?" The half-elf wizard's sister shook her head. "Nothing, I just want to explain to the adults. In fact, I am not Nicole, I am Andre. This is my sister Nicole. She inherited the barbarian blood of my mother. While exploring the path of wizards, she also practiced a way of knights." The half-elf wizard's sister pointed to the tall and burly half-elf man next to her, who was full of lumps of flesh and a large tuft of black chest hair, and introduced him to Ronan with sincerity and enthusiasm. The smile on Ronan's mouth froze on his face for a long time. He didn't move. In the forest, Ronan was running wildly with all his strength. What kind of dreamy creation can give birth to such an outrageous and abstract pair of brothers and sisters? How can barbarians get along with elves? Ronan ran, grumbling. He felt as if something in his heart had suddenly broken. He had thought that the beautiful night that represented the beginning of all the stories, the elf girl smiling gently at him by the campfire bah. Ronan shook his head vigorously, trying to get rid of all the messy images in his mind. Rustle, the sound of branches and leaves rubbing against each other came to his ears. Ronan turned his head and saw two wizards who were in a hurry and going in the opposite direction from him. Neither of them stopped at all. The moment their eyes met, the other party wanted to say something but hesitated, as if they wanted to say something to him, but soon passed by. It seems that the news of the appearance of the black-robed wizard has spread. There are probably many black-robed wizards in the forest. Ronan naturally knew what the other wizard wanted to remind him of. He had encountered more than one group of fleeing wizards along the way. In the forest filled with smoke and countless killings were quietly going on in unknown corners, there was probably no one else who chose to go against the flow except Ronan. It's not that Ronan didn't want to be a hero. If he still doesn't keep the oath of mutual assistance promised when the small group was established, what's the difference between him and Linus? The experience of killing the intermediate apprentice black-robed wizard just now also gave Ronan a lot of confidence, and it also gave him a clear understanding of his current strength. The power of the half-step expert level, energy missile, is enough to be comparable to the general zero-level advanced spells. In addition, with a casting time of only half a second, his combat power may be stronger than that of an ordinary 7th-level wizard or apprentice. Even if I encounter a stronger opponent, with my current physical fitness, it shouldn't be difficult to escape. Of course, nothing is absolute, and everything has hidden risks. But if he doesn't dare to take even this risk, Ronan really doesn't know the meaning of his hard work day and night. Shuttled through the silent forest, constantly approaching the place where the signal black smoke was densely emitted, Ronan's pace gradually slowed down. Releasing detection casually, Ronan carefully paid attention to the slightest movement in the surrounding environment, ready to enter the battle at any time. Although he was a little nervous at this time, he was not afraid at all, and was more calm. The deerskin boots covered with wet mud stepped lightly on the forest floor full of fallen leaves, making a rustling sound. The wind blew around, and the grass and trees swayed slightly. Ronan casually picked a light red berry near him, put it in his mouth and chewed it slowly, and the sour and slightly sweet taste slowly spread between his lips and tongue. Suddenly, a light and dense sound floated into Ronan's ears. Chirping. It was like someone was leaning over and whispering in his ear. This was the sound of spells chanting. Someone was hiding in the dark and preparing to cast a spell on him secretly. Ronan paused, his eyes instantly locked on a bush not far away, and a cold look appeared in his eyes. An expert-level energy missile was about to be thrown out. But at this time, the sound stopped abruptly. Ronan was slightly startled, a little unexpected. He thought that the person behind the bushes had given up casting the spell, but 2 seconds later, the sound of the spell chanting sounded again. Ronan frowned and took 2 steps forward. The chanting immediately became hurried and flustered. Then it quickly disappeared after a certain syllable was wrong. After a while, perhaps because the caster's mentality had adjusted, the chanting sounded again. After repeating this several times, Ronan was speechless. You don't have a good skill, but you want to learn to sneak attack? You should just learn to be funny. Ronan changed his mind immediately. He simply gave up the casting of energy missile, and gently placed his hand on the hilt of the one-handed sword at his waist. After all, it takes a lot of mental energy to release an expert-level energy missile. Any savings is a good thing. To deal with a rookie wizard, why use a butcher knife to kill a chicken? Ronan calmly walked towards the bushes of the target step by step. As his footsteps approached, the whispering of the spell chanting from behind the bushes became more and more hurried and flustered. The frequency of mistakes increased rapidly, and it was unknown how many times it happened in a short period of time. Until Ronan stood completely in front of the bushes, he could almost see the outline of the figure hiding behind the bushes. Elbaru. The chanting of the spell that was trembling and deformed due to fear and tension suddenly became louder, and he didn't care to cover it up at all. A trace of coldness flashed across Ronan's face, and the long sword tightly grasped under the robe slashed out. Rip! The long sword with cold light tore through the air, bursting out a half-moon-shaped white airwave visible to the naked eye, and the dense bushes were crushed into powder in large pieces. In the countless flying leaves, the long sword seemed to hit something, making a loud bang. But soon it continued to sweep across with unstoppable force. Chapter 36, Go. Don't kill me. The high-pitched and twisted scream startled a large flock of birds in the forest. Ronan stood there expressionlessly. The longsword in his hand was suspended straight in the air, and the cold sword tip was less than 3 centimeters away from a face that was so frightened that it had lost all its color. When Ronan saw the other person clearly, he was slightly stunned. Eugene. This rookie wizard who was hiding behind the bushes and secretly casting spells on him was actually Eugene, the wizard who had a conflict and a feud with him at the gathering. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. At this time, Eugene was completely frightened by Ronan's sword. The whole person was trembling, kneeling on the ground, his face full of collapse and fear, and he couldn't say a word except begging for mercy. Ronan looked up and down at Eugene's current appearance. He was carrying large and small bags on his back, and under his robe, it was bulging, obviously stuffed with a lot of things. At a glance, it was obvious that he was moving and escaping. If you think about it for a while, you can easily guess the cause and effect. Eugene, who was fleeing, had the misfortune to run into himself who had a grudge against him on the road. He was afraid and nervous, and worried that he would be unfavorable to him after meeting him, so he thought of hiding in the bushes to take the initiative. However, he was really disappointing. He could not recite a low-level spell of level 0 smoothly after more than 10 times. Looking at Eugene kneeling down and begging for mercy in front of him, and thinking of his arrogant, domineering, sinister and mean appearance at the rally, Ronan suddenly lost any interest in revenge and felt bored. Go away. Ronan put away his sword and cursed softly. Eugene was as if he had been pardoned. He hurriedly rolled and crawled back. The large and small packages hidden in the robe on his back fell down, which really made Ronan speechless. Suddenly, Ronan seemed to think of something and shouted at Eugene who was fleeing in panic. Wait! Eugene's body froze in an instant, and he turned around slowly with a look of despair. Don't worry, I won't kill you, I just want to ask you a few questions. Ronan said calmly, did you see Old Wells on the way here? Yes. Eugene immediately pointed in a direction. Ronan's spirits were slightly lifted. He didn't expect to get something. Seeing the way Eugene blurted out, he probably wouldn't lie to him. Then where did you hear the news about the black-robed wizard? Tell me in detail what you know. Black robe? Eugene was obviously stunned when he heard Ronan's question, and then his eyes widened, and even greater fear climbed onto his cheeks. The black-robed wizard has called. Eugene looked around subconsciously like a frightened rabbit, his face full of tension and fear. Ronan was confused by his reaction. If it's not because of the black robe, then why did you run away with your belongings? I heard there was a monster. Eugene stammered. They said there was a monster running out from the depths of the forest, eating people everywhere. What? This time it was Ronan's turn to be shocked. Monster. It turns out that the forest is in such a mess now. It turns out that it's not just the black robe wizard who is causing trouble, but also monsters are rampant. Ronan's face suddenly became ugly. He wanted to ask Eugene a few more questions, but when he looked up, he found that this guy had run away for a long distance. He was too lazy to chase him. With Eugene's timid look, he probably couldn't get anything out of him. Standing there with his eyes flashing quickly, Ronan still didn't change his mind about finding someone to save people. It's just that there is an additional monster in the unknown risk, so he has to speed up his pace. He quickly walked up and opened the several packages that Eugene accidentally dropped when he ran away. He found that they were all bottles and jars filled with unknown potion powder. Ronan slapped his forehead and said he regretted it. I forgot that this guy is a pharmacist. I should have taken the opportunity to blackmail him. It would have been nice to get a few bottles of useful potions. Hey. In the forest, Venetia supported Old Wells and walked with a staggering pace, with little Cheryl beside him. The three of them looked panicked, looking back from time to time, as if something was chasing them from behind. Don't worry about me. Cough, cough, cough. Old Wells suddenly spoke and coughed violently, with bloodstains on the collar of his robe. Our little tricks won't fool him for long, and the black-robed wizard will catch up soon. I'll hold him back for a while. Venetia, you take Cheryl and run away quickly. Old Wells' face was pale and bloodless, and the whole person seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant, but his tone was quite firm. Venetia bit her lip, said nothing, and her body seemed to grow in the same place, motionless. Cheryl tightly grasped the thigh of Old Wells, tears in her eyes, and kept shaking her head in a crying voice. No. No. We don't want to leave Grandpa Wells behind. Old Wells repeatedly urged them, but the two of them were as stubborn as two stones, and refused to leave him. Old Wells sighed deeply, and could only shake his head helplessly, letting the two of them support him and continue on the road. The official invasion of the Black Witch Land was half a year earlier than Old Wells expected. Even after realizing the coming of the crisis, he had already evacuated with Venetia and Cheryl as soon as possible, but he was still targeted by a cunning and evil black-robed wizard. The latter was a powerful intermediate wizard apprentice, whose strength was much greater than that of Old Wells. Old Wells was seriously injured by his spell after only one encounter with him. If they had not lived in this forest for decades and knew everything nearby, plus some secret traps that had been arranged early, perhaps they would have died when the crisis broke out. The terrifying enemy could catch up at any time. Now, Old Wells could only hope that someone would see the distress signal he released and come in time, so that the three of them might still have the chance to survive. The three of them supported each other and walked quickly in the forest. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded in the silent jungle. Three poor bugs are really good at running. Old Wells turned his head and looked behind him, only to see that the nightmare-like black-robed figure had indeed appeared again. His face changed instantly, and he hurriedly ran forward with Venetia and Cheryl. Old Wells was injured, and the speed of the three people's escape was touching. But the black-robed wizard who was chasing them was not in a hurry to catch them. He just followed them slowly, with an evil and cruel smile on his face like a corpse, as if he was thinking about how to make their death more interesting. Just when this cat-and-mouse game was halfway through, swish! A figure suddenly jumped out from a dense bush in the direction where Old Wells and the other two were running away, and rushed straight towards them with a nimble figure. The three were startled, and after seeing the appearance of the person, they were immediately overjoyed. But the next second, Old Wells seemed to have thought of something, and hurriedly took 2 steps forward, shouting anxiously with a face full of anxiety, "Ronan, go. Don't come over. This guy is not something you can deal with." Chapter 37 Venetia. Facing the shouts of Old Wells, the newcomer ignored them. The black-robed wizard following Old Wells and the other two laughed coldly when he saw someone coming. "I didn't expect to be so lucky. I can collect all the gray-robed wizard scalps required for the task in one wave. It's really good." Old Wells was so anxious that sweat broke out on his face when he heard this cold laugh. He knew the strength of the newcomer's companion very well. Although he was an intermediate wizard apprentice, he had completely risen to that level by taking drugs in just a few months. In normal times, apart from studying runes, he was obsessed with bodybuilding and had never practiced any spells. He was too young and was far from reaching the age where he could perfectly transform his mental power into combat power. Even if he reached that state, the black-robed wizard who had fought through conspiracy and blood was not something that wandering wizards like them, who had no proper inheritance and no special training, could deal with. Maybe your strength was obviously 1 or 2 small realms higher than the other party, but you were easily killed when you fought. In the invasion of the Black Wizard land that Old Wells experienced when he was young, he had seen too many similar examples. Hurry up and let Ronan take you away. Old Wells made up his mind and pushed Venetia and Cheryl away. He turned around and took the initiative to meet the black-robed wizard behind him. Cheryl's heart-wrenching cry sounded instantly, and Old Wells' heart trembled. The next second, he was resolute, took a deep breath, and began to recite the spell quickly despite the injury. However, before Old Wells could utter a few spell syllables, an inexplicable energy wave rose behind him. The terrifying sound of breaking through the air came from far away. Old Wells saw that the black-robed wizard, who was originally looking at this side with a sneer on his face, suddenly seemed to have seen a ghost. His face suddenly changed, and he turned around and ran away without saying a word. At this time, something passed over the head of Old Wells quickly. The whistling wind blew up the robe on Old Wells like a sail, and his white hair fluttered. Boom! A huge, dark blue and almost black energy ball quickly hit the fleeing black robe, exploding energy aftermath visible to the naked eye. The surrounding grass and trees were all shaking, and leaves were falling down. Shoo! A figure quickly ran past Old Wells, and ran to the deep pit where the black-robed wizard disappeared quite skillfully. He searched among the debris on the ground for a while, picked up a few things and quickly stuffed them into his arms. After doing all this, the man walked towards them. He walked in front of them, looked at the 3 of them, and showed a relieved expression on his face, and then asked, "Oh, by the way, where is Jacob? Isn't he with you?" Old Wells stared blankly at the young, handsome, familiar yet strange face in front of him, and subconsciously opened his mouth, but couldn't say a word. I looked around but couldn't find him. He's not at home either. Ronan frowned slightly, and after a little consideration, he finally decided, forget it, leave him alone. The forest is now full of dangers, with black robes and monsters appearing at the same time. He can't take others along for a missing Jacob. Looking up, the 3 people who had just been rescued by Old Wells were still staring at him with shocked and stunned eyes. In fact, it was mainly Old Wells who was the closest to him. After he showed his strength, he was naturally the most shocked. Ronan suspected that before this, in Old Wells's heart, he might still be the second-level apprentice, the fat boy who ran and exercised every day to get rid of the problem of energy particle erosion. "Are you injured?" Ronan noticed the ugly face of Old Wells. "I was hit by a spell." Old Wells said, "It's okay, I won't die." Ronan thought about it and leaned down. "Come, I'll carry you." Old Wells hesitated for a moment, but finally lay on Ronan's back. "Thank you, Ronan." Ronan shook his head after hearing Old Wells's complicated gratitude, and picked up little Cheryl. Since he became proficient in physical training, his strength has been amazing. He doesn't know how it compares to a regular knight, but Ronan thinks it's quite exaggerated. The weight of the old and the young is not a burden to him. He took a few people and turned back in the direction they came from. After running for a while, Ronan suddenly noticed that Venetia and the team didn't catch up. When he ran back, Venetia seemed to be in a bad state. Ronan reached out and pulled the hem of her robe, and saw that one of her ankles was swollen like a steamed bun, and he didn't know when it was twisted. "Why didn't you tell me you were injured?" Ronan couldn't help frowning. Venetia bit her lip, lowered her head and said nothing, like a child who made a mistake and was scolded. "Forget it, come up too. You are not the only one." Seeing her like this, Ronan didn't know what to say, so he just stretched out his hand and picked up Venetia, holding her in his arms on the other side. Venetia's shy resistance was like tickling to Ronan, but he was slightly surprised by another point. Ronan found that Venetia's figure was actually quite good. Usually covered by the loose and baggy wizard robe, it was really not visible at all. After running for a while with the 3 people in his sling, he felt that they were a long way away from the place where they encountered the black robe, and Old Wells asked Ronan to put him down. He meant that he hoped Ronan could save his energy. In fact, Ronan felt that he was fine. He had been running with 3 people for so long and only sweated a little. There was no problem fighting. But Old Wells insisted, so he put the 3 people down. After finding some medicine powder to heal the wounds at a nearby material storage point and using a one-handed sword to cut a few branches and walking sticks, the injured Old Wells and Venetia were finally able to move normally. In fact, there was still a long way to go before they could get out of the forest, but at least they were away from the most dangerous area, and everyone felt much more relaxed. Because of the experience of hugging just now, Ronan couldn't help but glance at Venetia subconsciously along the way. Through secret observation, Ronan found that Venetia's facial features hidden under her thick flaxen hair seemed to be pretty good, and even a little pretty. It's just that her skin is really bad. It's dark yellow and rough, without any luster, like a farmer who has been working in the fields for many years. This defect greatly reduced Venetia's appearance. It's a pity for this figure, it could have been above 90 points. Ronan secretly regretted in his heart. Putting aside her appearance, he actually had a good impression of the wizard girl Venetia. At the funeral of the wizard Potter, Venetia sang to comfort the traumatized Cheryl. Her gentle maternal behavior left a deep impression on him. Later, she and Old Wells adopted Cheryl, and it is said that she did not take anything left by Potter. She is definitely a girl with an extremely soft and kind heart. Maybe she was just carried by Ronan for a while, or maybe Ronan's behavior of secretly looking at her was discovered. Ever since she took the branch cane from Ronan, Venetia has been blushing and lowering her head, shy like a rabbit that can be manipulated by others. I didn't pay much attention when I was running all the way just now. After Ronan and his party slowed down, I realized how chaotic the tree house area was at this time. Thanks to my good brother Yideo for the Silver Alliance, I will add another chapter. Chapter 38, No Idlers in the Tree House Area. There were fallen trees and burning trees everywhere, lawns blasted by magic, thick smoke billowing from everywhere, and occasionally you could see corpses burnt by fire or frozen by frost, obviously from the hands of fellow wizards. Fear can also breed sin. There was a faint scream in his ears, and everyone tacitly did not ask to check. Old Wells leaned on his cane and muttered a sentence with a complicated expression. He seemed to be reminded of some unpleasant memories by the scene in front of him. Ronan saw a tree house that was blasted to pieces and collapsed in front of him, and his eyes flickered slightly. He wanted to go home. The magic stones he had accumulated in the past 2 months, as well as the finished rune stones that had not been sold, almost all of his belongings were hidden under an oak tree near his home, covered with thick fallen leaves, dead branches and stones. He must take this wealth back. However, the route they were taking to the town was quite far from where Ronan lived. If they wanted to go there, they would have to take a long detour. It wouldn't matter if Ronan was alone, since he could run fast anyway. The key was that he couldn't leave the 3 old, weak and disabled people around him and go alone. Just as Ronan was thinking about it, suddenly, 2 figures suddenly jumped out of the forest in front of him. The group was instantly alert, and Ronan was ready to throw energy missiles at any time. The 2 people on the opposite side were also startled by them, and they took several steps back nervously. However, a few seconds later, the leader of the opposite side, a middle-aged wizard with rang brown hair and a short beard, suddenly blurted out with a look of surprise and joy, "Wells. It's you." Ronan was startled and turned to look at the Old Wells beside him. "Do you know him?" The Old Wells nodded, "An old friend." He immediately walked up with a cane and quickly chatted with the middle-aged wizard. Ronan stood more than 10 meters away from them, squinting his eyes and staring at the actions of the 2 people on the opposite side. Although he was a friend of Old Wells, in this chaotic environment, people and ghosts could not be distinguished. It was normal for a good friend of many years to suddenly stab you. He had sharp senses and could faintly hear that the content of the conversation between Old Wells and the middle-aged wizard seemed to involve him. The middle-aged wizard looked at him frequently. It was not until more than 10 seconds later that Old Wells came back quickly and said to Ronan, "Barry Fania, with his son, wants to join us and go to the town with us. If you don't want to, I will reject him immediately." Ronan's eyes flashed, and he realized that the 2 wizards who met by chance were interested in the strength of his intermediate apprentice and wanted to seek protection for the next part of the journey. Ronan saw the rejection in Old Wells' eyes, thought about it, but still agreed. "Okay, let them follow." Old Wells' expression immediately became complicated, whispered thank you, nodded and turned to reply. Ronan stood there calmly. He accepted the two people, not simply because he didn't want to embarrass Old Wells. He thought that if he encountered any critical situation in the future, these two outsiders might come in handy at the critical moment. When did I become so sinister and cruel? Coming back to his senses, Ronan was shocked by his own changes. Thinking about the many dark sides of human nature he had seen along the way since the chaos broke out, he felt relieved again. These changes were forced out. Old Wells brought back two wizards, one big and one small. The wizard master and disciple expressed enough respect to Ronan. Although Ronan looked young, he was actually a mid-level apprentice, and he also practiced bodybuilding and had a strong body. In addition, he had killed two black robes of the mid-level apprentice level with his own hands. The domineering aura of a strong physique mixed with a faint smell of blood was enough to make ordinary low-level apprentice wizards unable to even raise their heads in front of him. The son of the middle-aged wizard Barry was a good example. The young man, who was a second-level apprentice, stuttered when he introduced himself to Ronan, which made his father Barry very embarrassed, with an expression of disappointment. With two more people in the team, Ronan felt that his plan to go home to get his belongings became more distant. However, the team had grown to 6 people, with 2 more reinforcements, which was considered a strong force in the chaotic forest, and blocked many malicious eyes. Gradually, Ronan found that there were people following the team. At first, he thought they were bold and blind rogues, but later he found out that they were some poor wizards who fled alone and wanted to borrow their power for fear of being robbed and killed. Ronan drove them away several times, but when they saw that he would not really hurt anyone, they became bolder and more people followed him. Ronan counted them and found that there were more than a dozen. He was almost numb. Just when he was having a headache and didn't know what to do, Barry, a middle-aged wizard who was in the first wave of shelters, took the initiative to stand up and volunteered to help Ronan solve the problem of cowhide plaster after getting rid of his butt. Ronan was curious about how he could solve it, so he went. 1 minute later, the size of their team directly expanded to 22 people. Your so-called solution is to turn the followers into companions. Ronan's eyes twitched slightly, and he was speechless when he looked at the wizard Barry in front of him. Barry seemed to be a little guilty, but soon said, "Don't let them rely on the companions for nothing. I have negotiated with them. When we arrive in the town safely, each of them must pay you a protection fee of 4 low-level magic stones." Talent. Ronan really wanted to give Barry a thumbs up. The treehouse area really doesn't keep idle people. The last person who received this evaluation from him was Jacob, a blunt fat man with the innate Bagua holy body. Since you can't get rid of them, just charge them to follow you, so that you won't lose anything. Thinking about it carefully, it seems that there is really no better way to deal with it than this. Ronan began to lead the mighty team towards the town, and completely gave up the idea of going home. Anyway, the treasure hidden under the tree would not be lost, so he could come back and get it later. It would be best if the consumed mental power could be replenished. Ronan thought to himself on the way. After the proficiency of energy missile reached the almost expert level, the mental power required for each spell increased accordingly. In perfect condition, Ronan's mental power as a level 5 apprentice can cast energy missile 8 times in total. After 8 times, he had to meditate to replenish it. He experienced 2 battles and lost 4 energy missiles, which consumed almost half of his mental power. Moreover, after fighting with the 2 black robes, Ronan found that the mental power drawn from each spell was increasing, and the remaining half of the mental power might not even be enough for the expected 4 spells. Energy missile may be upgraded. Ronan had a vague feeling, and for a moment, he was full of expectations and a little worried. Chapter 39 Sleeping Potion. Do you have any potions that can help restore your mental power? Lend them to me first. It was definitely unrealistic to meditate on the spot at this moment, so Ronan asked the people around him if they had the corresponding potions. Old Wells and others shook their heads, and the middle-aged wizard Barry said he could help Ronan ask the wizards who were dependent on him. Barry walked into the crowd, and Ronan watched him find people to ask one by one. The responses he got were basically shakes of the head. There were also faint complaints. Didn't you say that you would pay after arriving in the town? Why do you want benefits now? In the end, when Wizard Barry came back with a helpless look on his face, the result he got was naturally nothing. Ronan didn't feel disappointed, because he was just trying his luck. The price of mental power recovery potions and concentration potions is almost the same, So how could the lower-level wizards living in the treehouse area have them? Even if they had them, they might not be willing to give them out, even though Ronan specifically told Barry that he was buying them with money, not letting people give them away for free. Forget it, let's go. Ronan originally thought of forgetting it, and asked everyone to continue on the road. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to set off, a weak voice sounded in his ears. Just a potion that can help restore mental strength will do. Ronan was startled and quickly looked in the direction of the voice. It turned out that the person who spoke was Barry's son, the young second-level apprentice wizard who stood in front of him and dared not breathe. Do you have it? Take it out and let me see it. Ronan spoke quickly. He remembered that Barry had introduced his son before. His name was Sean. He has nothing. Before Sean could speak, Barry got anxious first, staring at Sean and shouting, "Have you seen a recovery potion? Do you know how many magic stones are in a recovery potion? How dare you say such a thing? I definitely don't have a recovery potion, but I have made my own. The effect is almost the same," Sean refuted with an unconvinced look on his face, and directly took out 4 or 5 potion bottles from his waist bag. Ronan was quite surprised, and looked at Sean and asked, "You are actually a pharmacist?" Sean smiled embarrassedly, but Barry was helpless. What kind of pharmacist is he? He just tinkers with a potion book he bought from the street stall. I haven't seen him take meditation so seriously. Hey. Ronan didn't respond to Barry's words, but picked up the potion Sean handed over and looked at it in front of his eyes. The inferior crystal bottle was filled with grey potion, and the obvious black sediment in it made Ronan hesitate. Are you sure it has the effect of restoring mental power? Ronan looked at Sean. Sean patted his chest and assured, "Of course, I drank it myself, more than once. Just 1 bottle can make my mental power fully restored. That's it." Sean became hesitant at the end of his words. There are some minor side effects. It would be unreasonable if there were no side effects. Ronan was not surprised at all, and asked Sean what the side effects were. Drowsiness. I will feel sleepy immediately after drinking it. Sleepiness? Ronan frowned. How long do you usually sleep after taking the medicine? Half an hour. Sean answered without thinking, and then Barry beside him slapped his head hard. Drinking medicine once and sleeping for half an hour, what kind of mental power recovery potion is this? It's a knockout potion. Sean covered his head and shouted, so I named it a sleeping potion. Everyone present was speechless, but Ronan looked at the potion in his hand and fell into thought. Does it sleep for half an hour every time? Not necessarily, sometimes it only lasts for 20 minutes. Have you been the only one who drank it? Yes. Sean glanced at Barry next to him with a guilty look. After Ronan asked Sean a few questions, he thought about it, unscrewed the bottle and poured a little into his mouth, tasted it, and then drank the whole bottle in one breath. The people around him were shocked, and it was too late to stop him, so they could only stare at Ronan's reaction with wide eyes. The effect of the medicine came quickly. As Sean said, Ronan began to feel sleepy after a while. Strong sleepiness surged up like a tide, and he yawned one after another, and his eyelids kept drooping down. Once, twice, 3 times. Shoo! Ronan woke up suddenly, just like taking a short nap in a class on a summer afternoon, and the whole person had an indescribable feeling of wakefulness. How long did I sleep? Ronan asked the people around him. Old Wells took out a brass pocket watch and looked at it, hesitantly said, half a minute? Maybe less than. Tisk. Ronan's eyes lit up, and a happy expression appeared on his face. Just as he guessed, the side effect of this sleeping potion that makes people sleepy and dozing off is indeed different for different people. The thin and small young man Sean slept for half an hour, but he was physically strong, and he only took a half-minute nap after taking a bottle. As for the recovery of mental power, it was indeed very good. Ronan's mental power, which was originally only half left, was almost full now. Very good, this potion is very useful to me. Ronan patted Sean's shoulder with satisfaction, and took out 2 low-level magic stones from his waist bag, which meant to buy all the bottles of sleep potion that Sean took out. In fact, Sean's sleeping potion is not as magical as others think. To put it bluntly, it uses drugs to make people enter a state similar to deep sleep, so as to help replenish energy quickly. There is no comparison with a recovery potion that can help restore energy while casting spells in battle. But in the current situation, it is surprisingly suitable for Ronan, who has a strong physique. Ronan said a few words of encouragement to Sean, and then called everyone to move forward. The 2 magic stones he gave were forcibly returned by Barry, and Sean himself didn't care. In comparison, he was very happy and excited to be able to help Ronan and make people around him look at him with new eyes. Sean's eyes obviously had a lot more light, and he became more confident. Even Barry's attitude towards his own son has improved a lot. The group marched towards the town in a mighty manner, and the journey was unexpectedly smooth. Except for the occasional encounter with a few blind wizards who immediately ran away with a change of expression after taking a look at the large number of them, there was basically no setback. Seeing that they were about 10 minutes away from completely walking out of the forest, the team gradually became agitated. Many people gathered together and whispered while walking, glancing at Ronan from time to time, and some even walked further and further away, sneaking around, as if they would leave the team in the next second and go into the small woods next to them. Ronan watched coldly, with no expression on his face. He had expected this to happen. When life safety is guaranteed and fear subsides, someone will definitely start to feel sorry for the protection fee of the 4 magic stones. He didn't do anything, so why did he ask us for 4 magic stones? If he had known that he was so lucky and didn't encounter any danger, he shouldn't have agreed to give any protection fee. Ronan knew exactly what these guys were thinking at the moment, and he was too lazy to care about it, and he couldn't care about it. Wizard Barry looked anxious, and he hesitated to speak to Ronan several times. After walking a little further, some people could not hold back and deliberately slowed down their pace or sneaked towards the bushes on the side. It seemed that this temporary escape team was about to fall apart in the next second. At this moment, roar! An unusual roar of a wild beast suddenly sounded from the front, shocking the whole team. "Thank you, the leader of the gang. Thank you." Chapter 40 Incredible. The field fell into a moment of silence. Everyone stood still and looked in the direction of the roar with horror. Ronan's expression became serious. He gently pressed the hilt of the one-handed sword under his robe, pushed away the crowd in front of him, and quickly walked to the front of the team. Before he could get close, the bushes in front of him suddenly shook violently, and then 2 figures came out one after another. The 2 wizards were obviously fleeing. Their robes were tattered and covered with dust. Seeing the large group of people suddenly appearing in front of them, they were startled, and a huge surprise suddenly appeared on their faces. However, the next second, they were occupied by panic. They pointed behind them and shouted loudly, "There's a monster! Run!" Before the voice fell, an extremely strong smell of rottenness drifted from the front. The sound of a large area of bushes being trampled was accompanied by a strong wind. A terrifying creature the size of a bison quickly appeared in front of everyone. It looked like a reptile, with brown-red skin, scales all over, and many black spikes as long as daggers on its back. Its long snake tongue spitted up and down, and it looked like a giant lizard. When the pair of golden eyes swept over Ronan, Ronan almost felt like he was looking into someone's eyes. This proved that under the cold, cruel and bloodthirsty nature of the monster in front of him, it might also have wisdom that was not inferior to that of humans. "Be careful." Old Wells came behind Ronan with a cane at some point, and said quickly in a serious tone, "It's the 2-headed demon lizard. Why does it only have 1 head? When it really grows 2 heads, it will be a first-level demon beast. Only a formal wizard can deal with it." Ronan exhaled lightly, nodded, and focused his energy on the demon lizard in front of him. In fact, facing this legendary demon beast, Ronan was not as nervous as he had imagined. The crisis warning signal brought by intuition was not very strong, proving that the strength of the 2-headed demon lizard with only 1 head was just average. What made Ronan feel physically and mentally uncomfortable was more its ugly and creepy appearance and the stench that kept coming to his face. Without any hesitation, Ronan uttered the syllables, and the mental power in his mind was like a plucked string, and resonance was achieved. A large number of free energy particles gathered under his control. A huge blue-black ball of light was generated out of thin air. With Ronan's finger, it roared towards the 2-headed demon lizard in front. Boom! A loud noise was heard, and the ground under everyone's feet also trembled violently. Old Wells and others who had seen Ronan's attack were fine, but the other wizards who saw Ronan's strength for the first time were shocked by the unexpected movement and stepped back. The look in their eyes when they looked at Ronan also changed instantly. Although they were all low-level wizards and low-level apprentices, they had also seen wizards at the intermediate apprentice level take action. Is the power of the intermediate level 0 spell so great? The key is, how can the casting speed be so fast? Exclamation mark. Many people stared at the huge pit formed after the explosion of the light ball, swallowing their saliva, with a look of shock and confusion on their faces. Fuck. Ronan cursed secretly at this moment. His spell failed. The moment he threw it, he sensed the disappearance of the two-headed demon lizard. This thing was too fast, and Ronan's mental power only caught a flash of black shadow before losing the lock on the opponent. This was the first time that Ronan's energy missile missed. Eye peering into the truth. Ronan quickly recited the spell silently, and performed the detection technique at a proficient level, with a faint white light attached to his lake blue eyes. His muscles were slightly tense, and he looked around for the traces of the two-headed demon lizard. The power of the energy missile seemed to be a little stronger. The last one almost drained nearly a quarter of his mental power. Good news, and bad news. Ronan could clearly feel that the energy missile was closer to the level above the breakthrough expert, but if the next 3 energy missiles could not solve the battle in front of him, he might have to run away. Found it. Detection quickly captured the traces of the alien energy particles in the air. The Warcraft creatures with natural energy-compatible physiques had no way to hide under detection. Buzz! Ronan fired another energy missile directly at a bush. This time he played a little trick. When casting the spell, his eyes were always looking in other directions, and his fingers were deliberately pointing randomly when throwing the missile. Boom! Roar! Facts have proved that his little trick is indeed useful. The second energy missile accurately hit the two-headed demon lizard that was lurking in the dark. Ronan only heard a shrill roar mixed with the explosion, and then the two-headed demon lizard ran away. It's really smart. It ran away immediately when it knew it couldn't afford to fend. Ronan walked to the landing point of the second energy missile, looking at the small bloody tail left on the edge of the pit, and the mottled bloodstains extending in one direction, and couldn't help but sigh in amazement. His heart was pounding, and he was still immersed in the battle state just now. The battle came and ended quickly, far beyond Ronan's expectations. He walked back with the half-broken tail of the two-headed demon lizard, and what awaited him was a gaze full of awe. Those wandering wizards who had been eager to escape before, after seeing Ronan's tyrannical strength, now gave up the idea of leaving the team one by one. Fear was one thing, and wanting to build a good relationship with a strong apprentice wizard like Ronan, and to get close to him was another. Especially since Ronan looked so young, some people with quick minds had already taken the initiative to run up to Ronan to carry things. Ronan's expression eased a little. No one would not like to enjoy the respect and awe of others, especially people of his age. Just as Ronan was about to throw the broken tail of the two-headed demon lizard to an especially diligent apprentice wizard, at this moment, an unprecedented strong sense of crisis suddenly pounced on him from behind like a beast, biting Ronan's heart fiercely. Time seemed to slow down at this moment, and Ronan only had time to make a backward turn. The results of his daily hard training, ascetic bodybuilding, appeared at this moment. His muscles were tense, and his back was suspended in the air and turned over in a posture that almost violated the laws of physics, relying on his feet to support himself from the ground. And the next moment he made this move, his face was covered by a thick shadow. In Ronan's wide eyes, a huge and rotten black blade quickly appeared, silently brushing his nose and slashing forward. The wizard apprentice, who was smiling and stretched out his two hands to take the things handed by Ronan, was swept by the black blade. Under the shadow, his whole body quietly separated from the waist and abdomen, and blood spurted out like a pillar in an instant, but his face was still wearing a flattering smile. Bang! Ronan slapped the ground fiercely, and rolled and shot to the side like a struggling fish. When he stood up again with a solemn face, he saw a skeleton more than 2 meters tall standing quietly in the distance. It was wrapped in wisps of black hair, and was wearing a tattered and rotten armor. Its 2 hands held a rusty longsword and a shield respectively. Green fire burned in the empty eye sockets without a trace of flesh and blood, and it was staring at Ronan dimly. At this time, a light tisk sound came from behind the skeleton. A figure in a black robe walked out. He was a short-haired man with an ordinary appearance, and his pale skin was covered with scarlet tattoos. He looked at Ronan with a very unexpected look, and smiled as if he was a corpse that had just crawled out of a grave. It's incredible that you can survive. Chapter 41 No More Fighting. Ronan's body was stiff, and his face was tight. The effect of detection had not completely faded. In his eyes, which were glowing white, the man with the blood-red tattoo in front of him was as eye-catching as a huge glowing light bulb. Senior, apprentice Ronan said a few words with difficulty. Black robe? Only the mental power of a senior wizard apprentice could produce such an effect under detection. The black-robed man with tattoos on his face listened to him, slightly pulled the corner of his mouth, and suddenly pointed at him. The sword and shield skeleton that had almost killed Ronan with a knife immediately received the order and strode towards him. Ronan retreated without saying a word, and shouted at the group of gray-robed wizards behind him who were already stunned by the sudden change and still standing there without knowing how to move. What are you standing there for? Why don't you run? The unlucky wizard who was cut in half by the sword and shield skeleton was not completely dead yet. Half of his body was lying on the ground and kept making shrill and painful howls. The gray robes woke up as if from a dream. With a roar, they were in chaos and fled in all directions. The sword-shield skeleton chasing Ronan also rushed into the crowd. Ronan heard the screams coming from behind him, but he had no energy to pay attention to them. He could only frantically urge Old Wells and others to run away. He wanted to use the same trick again, but the moment he picked up Cheryl, his hair stood on end. He quickly threw Cheryl to the side and rolled forward. Bang! A dark green ball of light hit the place where Ronan had just stood. There was no big noise, but the corrosive acid that was instantly formed made a large piece of land sink visibly. If this fell on him. Ronan gritted his teeth. He had seen this spell that released corrosive acid in the hands of the two black robes before. But the same spell, the power released by the intermediate apprentice and the senior apprentice, is really different. Quickly getting up and passing through the chaotic crowd, Ronan and the black-robed man in the distance looked at each other from a distance. The latter's mental power had been firmly locked on him. Obviously, it was impossible to lead people to escape like before. You guys go quickly. Ronan took a breath, drew out the one-handed sword from his waist, and quickly recited the spell of charge weapon. He wiped his fingers across the sword, and the long sword was covered with brilliant streams of light. I'll hold him back. Don't worry about me. Only when you leave can I have the chance to escape. Ronan said this and walked quickly towards the black-robed man with a cold expression. The sword-shield skeleton slaughtered the scattered wizards. Many chants, spell roars and screams were mixed together. Ronan tried not to let himself be affected by the many tragic scenes on the field, and forced himself to calm down. He took out the two rings hidden on his waist. The black turquoise ring flashed, and a layer of light transparent light film enveloped Ronan's body. Intermediate protective magic ring. Ronan picked up another fireball magic ring and raised his hand. A fireball was born and shot towards the black-robed man quickly. Faced with this low-level spell triggered by a magic tool, the latter had an indifferent expression and did not even try to dodge. Bang! The fireball shot by Ronan exploded more than 1 meter in front of the black-robed man, and was blocked by a layer of black light curtain, burning only a few circles of ripples. Sure enough, there are protective measures. Ronan stared at the light curtain in front of the black-robed man, which was obviously much thicker than the energy protection light shield on his body. It was probably triggered by a zero-level advanced spell or a magic tool. The power of the half-step expert level, energy missile, is comparable to that of a zero-level advanced spell, but if you want to be sure of breaking the zero-level advanced spell defense, you must cooperate with swordsmanship. Ronan's brain was working quickly, his eyes flickering, thinking about the next tactics. He was now looking forward to the expert level, energy missile, to successfully break through after the next spell, so that he might have a chance to turn the tables and kill. Hiss! Ronan took a deep breath and slowly began to speed up. His body was fully activated at this moment, and his muscles were flowing like mercury. His feet stepped on the soft ground, tensed, and exploded. Ronan rushed out like a sharp arrow, and his violent momentum raised a long wave of earth behind him. When he rushed halfway, the wind of decay whistled in his ears. Ronan glimpsed a cold shadow from the corner of his eyes, and his body instinctively jumped forward. Bang! The huge rusty long knife with large pieces of blood and flesh smeared on it slashed the grass behind Ronan, blasting out a large pile of soil and leaving a deep gully. Before Ronan could breathe a sigh of relief, he suddenly saw a man in a black robe not far away holding a gray staff with a black ball on the top, chanting a spell at him. Ronan felt a palpitation for no reason, and his keen mental power captured that a large number of energy particles were gathering towards a certain position in front of him. He glanced at it hastily, and saw only a corpse that was constantly swelling. Boom! A violent explosion sounded, and in the huge blood mist that rose instantly, Ronan rushed out with his sword raised. His robes rustled, His hair was covered with a thin layer of blood, and the light film around him was turbulent. He thought he had broken through the layers of obstacles and would soon be able to get in front of the black-robed man, but he never thought that this was just the beginning. Fresh corpses were pulled towards him by invisible forces, swelling light balloons, followed by sword and shield skeletons with faint green fire in their eyes. At this moment, Ronan was almost desperate. The desire to escape in his heart was stronger than ever. Is this the strength of the high-level apprentice black-robed wizard who is good at fighting? It's too scary and difficult to deal with. Boom boom boom. The swollen corpses exploded one after another, and the red airwaves raised a violent wind, and Ronan's figure was submerged in blood. The sword and shield skeleton, waiting for the opportunity, seized the key point of the explosion and slashed at the center of the blood mist. Ronan. Someone screamed Ronan's name. The chaotic scene seemed to be suddenly quiet for a moment. Many people looked at the location where the blood mist exploded. When the wind blew away the large area of blood, the scene inside was finally clearly revealed. Ronan held the sword with both hands, half knelt on the ground, and resisted the downward pressure of the rotten longsword in the sword and shield skeleton's hand. His face was slightly ferocious, and the protective light film around him had long disappeared. I don't know if his chestnut hair was wet by sweat or blood, and it stuck to his forehead in strands. Crack, crack. The one-handed sword covered with flowing light in his hand made a sound of being overwhelmed, and obvious cracks had appeared on the sword body, and they were constantly expanding. Ronan gritted his teeth and fiercely lifted the long sword that was on the verge of breaking. The moment the long sword completely broke and exploded into a ball of light, he let it go. At the same time, he uttered the syllables of the spell, summoning a huge blue-black light ball, and threw it at the sword shield skeleton in front of him. Boom! The energy light ball exploded. Under the huge explosion, Ronan stepped on the spreading airwave and flew back. The determination and eagerness on his face at the beginning had long gone. No more fighting. I am just a small 5th-level apprentice, and I am a wandering group. I must be crazy to do such a thing. I actually want to challenge a black-robed wizard at the level of a senior apprentice. After several rounds of fighting with a black-robed man, Ronan was in a mess, narrowly escaping death, and the whole person was completely awakened. Now there is only a strong desire to survive in his body. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42, Extraordinary Domain. After a few steps and more than 10 meters away, Ronan saw Old Wells, Venetia, Wizard Barry and others standing dozens of meters away from him, looking at him worriedly, and they had not run far yet. Ronan was anxious and tried to urge them to leave quickly, but the next second he was locked by a strong and cold mental force. His heart tightened and he turned his head quickly. He saw the black-robed man in the distance looking at him coldly, with coldness and indifference in his eyes, as if he was looking at a bug trying to escape. He was chanting, uttering one strange syllable after another. In the field full of broken limbs and flesh, pieces of pale bones floated and gathered in the air in front of him. Under the guidance of invisible forces, they quickly pieced together the shape of a bone spear. Blood-colored runes flowed on the spear, and the tip of the spear pointed at Ronan. In an instant, Ronan's eyebrows felt like being pricked by a needle. We can't let him cast this spell. Otherwise, I will probably die. Ronan's pupils contracted, and a voice in his heart yelled at him. We must interrupt his spell. Ronan made a quick decision in his mind. He wiped the blood foam and sweat on his face fiercely, gritted his teeth, and his pale and handsome face looked a little hideous. Buzz, energy missile. The spell syllables were uttered, and the resonance between mental power and energy particles was achieved. A huge blue-black ball of light appeared in front of Ronan, and then quickly shot out in the direction of his thoughts. The moment the energy missile was thrown out, Ronan's figure couldn't help but stagger slightly. He didn't have much mental power left, and the casting of energy missile drained it out directly. The blue-black energy ball was wrapped in a terrifying might, and it raised a gust of wind and rushed towards the black-robed man. I thought the other party's emotions would at least fluctuate, but I didn't expect that the black-robed man who was concentrating on chanting didn't even raise his eyelids when facing Ronan's attack. When the energy ball was about to hit the other party, a tall, pale figure with a thick black aura rushed out from the side and blocked the light ball firmly. Bang! The explosion sounded, and the sword and shield skeleton, which was hit by the light ball Hoddam, staggered back. The rotten shield in its hand had already shattered when it took Ronan's energy missile last time, and this time it relied on its bone body to resist. The overflowing energy flowed through its body, and the ribs of the sword and shield skeleton's entire chest were completely shattered, and bone fragments fell down, but the green ghost fire in the eye sockets was not extinguished, and it only took half a breath to calmly stand up again. The broken bones that fell from its body were all drawn over by the black-robed man's spell, which in turn accelerated the formation of the white bone spear. Fuck. Ronan's face was ugly, and he cursed the black-robed man with his undead servants in his heart for being a scumbag. When fighting, he let the fearless undead brothers take the lead, and he cast spells calmly, attacking and defending. How can ordinary people play with him? If he hadn't practiced bodybuilding, the black-robed man wouldn't have to do anything, and the sword and shield skeleton alone would be enough to give him a headache, although it was already a headache. Ronan quickly took out the sleeping potion he had gotten from Sean before, opened the bottle, and poured 2 bottles into his mouth in one breath. Then he quickly pulled out the spare dagger from his waist and stabbed it hard into his thigh. HMPH. The moment the tip of the knife entered the flesh, the blue veins on Ronan's forehead jumped suddenly, and he groaned. The intense pain instantly extinguished the sleepiness that had just emerged. The price of stabbing himself was that Ronan's mental power was fully restored. Without any delay, Ronan, whose mental power was fully restored, cast energy missile, again with a cold face. Throw 2 more. Whether it succeeds or not, turn around and run away immediately. A thought flashed through his mind, and an energy missile was fired. Without even looking at the result, Ronan resisted the nausea caused by the slight backlash of mental power from continuous casting in a short period of time, and prepared to throw another missile without stopping. However, this time, before he could recite the syllables of the spell, the mental power in his mind became active first. Inexplicably, a wonderful resonance was achieved. Ronan was stunned for a moment, and before he could figure out how this strange change happened, the next second, his mental power was like water from a floodgate, and was suddenly and frantically extracted. In just a few breaths, the mental power of a level 5 apprentice that had just been fully replenished was directly consumed. Ah! Ronan screamed and suddenly covered his head with both hands. At this moment, his expression was distorted with pain, and his forehead was covered with dense veins. His long hair on his shoulders fluttered without wind, and some of it quietly turned from chestnut to gray. Ronan endured the severe pain that seemed to split his head, and saw a stream of mottled energy flowing in front of his eyes and converging to a point. Large pieces of light were distorted in front of his eyes, and the air collapsed. There was an indescribable and undetectable mysterious aura that permeated and intertwined into an indescribable and terrifying force field. In the force field, a pure black light spot quietly appeared. It was like a supermicro black hole, and all the light and energy particles around were quickly sucked in. Ronan's expression was ferocious, his mind was muddy, and his vision was blurred. Only then did he realize that the chanting that had been lingering in his ears, as if it was a death-prompting voice, had stopped at some point. He subconsciously looked in the direction of the black robe, and could only barely see a figure standing still. The black robe's spell didn't seem to be completed. The white bone spear that brought Ronan an incomparable sense of crisis was still hanging in the air. However, the black robe stopped chanting for some reason and stared at him blankly. The expression on his face was very strange, stunned, surprised, confused, and trance. It was as if, in an impossible place, with an impossible person, he saw an impossible thing happening. He had lost his mind. Supernatural domain. Ronan barely heard the black-robed man's mumbling, and saw him shaking his head, constantly doubting himself, and saying impossible words. Ronan felt so uncomfortable that his head seemed to be about to split, and his body was shaky. He didn't care what the black robe said at all. He had to use all his strength to point a finger in the direction of the black robe. Go. With the guidance of his thoughts, the pure black light spot in front of Ronan, which was entangled with the aura of the terrible force field, flew out rapidly with a terrifying momentum that seemed to crush and strangle everything, and then silently smash everything that blocked its path. Plop. When everything was over, Ronan half knelt on the ground in exhaustion. His whole body was soaked in sweat, his mind was blank, and only the instinctive wheezing and violent panting remained. The clean rune on the grey robe took effect, and Ronan's body rose with a faint blood color like smoke. The huge field fell into dead silence. Time seemed to be completely still at this moment. I don't know how long it took. Seeing Ronan struggling to stand up shakily, several figures woke up from a dream and rushed towards him like flying. Chapter 43 Master Level, Particle Torrent. Right square bracket. A streak of sunset glow in the sky was like blood, and the afterglow of the setting sun fell on the gray-white small square. The chants of returning to the peaceful hometown sounded from time to time, and the people coming and going hurriedly. A sad and depressed atmosphere flowed in the field. Another group of people walked into the square. They came from the direction of the forest, looking embarrassed, and their wizard robes were tattered and dirty, more or less stained with blood, as if they had just experienced a life and death battle. After entering the square, everyone in the team showed a relieved expression on their faces, as if they had survived a disaster. They hugged each other, their expressions were excited, and some even shed tears. The wizards passing by cast curious or indifferent glances, thinking that this was probably another group of poor people who had escaped from the evil black-robed wizard. After the excitement, the wizards began to take the initiative to approach one direction. They gathered in front of a tall figure in the team, presented him with a magic stone, and then bent down solemnly to kiss the hem of his gray robe. This is the etiquette between wizards that represents the highest gratitude and respect. In informal occasions, few people would use it. Now, many wizards use it on one person, and none of them thinks there is anything wrong with this behavior. It is really surprising. I spent 15 magic stones to buy a proper robe. The last wizard left, and Ronan looked at the hem of his robe that was obviously wet with saliva, and his eyes twitched. He endured it for the sake of a bag of magic stones. Looking up at the blood-red setting sun in the sky, the Hoddam college shrouded in white fog was like a quiet and dormant giant beast. Ronan felt as if he was in another world for a moment. Fortunately, I survived. He whispered softly, came back to his senses, and looked at Old Wells, Venetia, Cheryl, and Wizard Barry and his son who had not left yet. The three of Old Wells must be following him, Barry and his son said. My uncle has been serving as an assistant to a certain official wizard in the academy. He has his own property in the town. Although I don't want to, I have to go to him this time. Wizard Barry explained the situation with a helpless expression, left an address for several people, expressed his sincere gratitude to Ronan again, and hurriedly left with his son Sean. After seeing off Barry and his son, Old Wells and the other two asked Ronan where he would go next. Now he has replaced Old Wells as the backbone of the small group. Let's find a place to stay first and try to contact Andre and the others tomorrow. If nothing unexpected happens, they should have arrived in the town a long time ago. Ronan rubbed his eyebrows with his hands, his face full of fatigue that could not be concealed. At this time, people came and went in the Hoddam wizard land, and there was a tense and depressing atmosphere everywhere, but he just wanted to have a soft and comfortable big bed to lie down and have a good sleep. At night, in a wizard's inn in the living area of the town. The room was not very big, the windows were tightly closed, and a few slow-witted moths tirelessly flew into the old, glowing crystal wall lamps again and again. Hoolah! Ronan stood up from the bathtub naked, grabbed a bath towel, and stepped barefoot on the cold wooden floor. After wiping the water stains on his body, Ronan exhaled, and walked to a silver dressing mirror in the corner of the room with half-wet hair. The boy in the mirror was tall and straight, masculine and handsome, as vigorous and bright as the rising sun. It was just that a few gray hairs inadvertently revealed in the chestnut hair on his forehead, which made him more mature and mysterious than his peers. Is it a sequelae? Ronan gently touched his hair on his forehead, frowned slightly, and then began to check other parts of his body. Everything was intact, except for the cut on the inside of his left thigh that he had stabbed with a dagger, and some small cuts on both sides of his cheeks and the back of his hands that were torn by the aftermath of the battle. There were no other injuries. Because of the medication, the wounds have scabbed over and now feel a little itchy. After checking his body, Ronan put on his clothes and sat at the table in the middle of the room to recall the danger of the daytime battle. The black-robed wizard at the advanced apprentice level has a strong mental power, smooth spellcasting, excellent equipment, and rich combat experience. Even among the same level, he is definitely a strong man. I was able to survive from him and eventually kill him. In addition to the huge gap in the strength level of both sides, the other party inevitably despised me a lot, and the most important thing was the power and shock brought by the master level energy missile. Thinking of this, Ronan couldn't help but open his character panel. Name: Ronan Damien. Age: 16. Talent: No attribute affinity, strength, 5th level wizard apprentice, 11%, skills, basic meditation, expert 219/800, energy missile, particle torrent, master 1/1600, charged weapon, proficient 344/400, rune marking, clean, proficient 177, 200, shining, proficient 27/200, protection, entry 13 out of 100, ascetic body forging, proficient 105/400, basic swordsmanship, proficient 395 out of 400, fireball, entry 10 out of 100, ice ball, entry 20 out of 100, detection, proficient 8/200, master level energy missile. After a series of battles with a black-robed wizard and a warcraft, Ronan unknowingly maxed out the last point of proficiency of the expert level, energy missile, when he was about to escape, and successfully broke through to the master level. The energy missile, with proficiency promoted to the master level, not only has a radical transformation in spell form and spell strength, but also has a suffix called particle torrent, after the original skill name. Particle torrent. Ronan looked at the panel and whispered these 4 words. Recalling the scene when he cast the master level energy missile, that breath drained all his mental power and absorbed the black particles condensed by the vast amount of free energy particles. When it was activated, it really gave people a terrifying power of a torrent, crushing and destroying everything. Thinking about it now, I still feel scared. He was just a beginner at the master level, with only 1 point of proficiency, but he directly crossed several small realms and killed a powerful senior wizard apprentice on the spot. This power, I'm afraid it can be comparable to the first level spells that can only be practiced by formal wizards? Exclamation mark. After reaching master level, energy missile seems to have completely transformed into another spell. Ronan couldn't help but think of what a black-robed man muttered before he died. There was a word mentioned in it that left a deep impression on him. It seemed to be called something. Domain of law? Exclamation mark. Ronan's fingers gently tapped the wooden tabletop, and in a crisp and rhythmic sound, he finally remembered the full name of the word. Transcendent. Domain of law. Chapter 44 Harvest. Is this a specific description of the master-level spell realm in the wizarding world? Ronan couldn't help guessing, but unfortunately there was no way to verify it. His knowledge of various things in the wizarding world was too scarce. There were many things that he didn't know, didn't understand, and had never heard of. It was not easy to find someone to ask, and no one around him probably knew. This was the difference between wandering wizards and academy wizards with orthodox inheritance. It was also the main reason why most academy wizards had a natural sense of superiority when facing wandering wizards. Regardless of other things, the two sides were not at the same level in terms of knowledge. I have to enter the academy as soon as possible. The inheritance and acquisition of knowledge are too important for a wizard. Ronan secretly made up his mind. In fact, he left the forest tree house area, this time with the intention of joining the academy directly for further study. The Hoddam Wizard Academy has very strict admission standards for formal students, and the requirements for solo qualifications are very high. But if it is just the qualification of an auditor, then the conditions are much more relaxed, as long as there are enough magic stones. Ronan's predecessor entered the academy as an auditor, but he had little money. After getting a set of the most basic low-level wizard apprentice inheritance, he had to choose to drop out. Auditors have almost no rights in the academy, and they have to spend magic stones no matter what they do. But Ronan doesn't care, because he has money now. In this fight and escape, there were as many as 3 black-robed wizards who died in his hands, and they were all wizard apprentices above the intermediate level, and one of them was a senior apprentice. Each of them was equipped with a storage waste bag, and the conditions were simply too good. Thinking of this, Ronan couldn't help but take out all 3 storage waste bags with great expectation and put them on the table for careful inspection. From the outside, the waste bag of the black-robed man with a blood-red tattoo on his face, who was a senior wizard apprentice, was the most beautiful. The waste bag made of pure black leather felt very textured, and there were many exquisite patterns embroidered on it, which looked very high-end. The storage waste bags of the remaining 2 intermediate apprentices were all gray and looked inconspicuous. On the way to escape, Ronan had not found a chance to open them, and now he could not wait to check them one by one. As a result, a few minutes later, Ronan's face turned ugly. He could not open any of the 3 storage waste bags. This thing actually has a lock. Ronan was a little depressed. He also just knew that the storage waste bag can be locked. There is a special small rune at the mouth of each waste bag, which requires the owner of the waste bag to inject mental power to open it, just like the fingerprint password lock of mobile phones and computers in the previous life. If an outsider wants to open the waste bag, he must first erase the mental power mark left by the original owner in the rune lock. This process is more troublesome. If you want to open the waste bag completely without damaging the lock, the best way is to spend time grinding it slowly bit by bit. The stronger the mental power mark left by the original owner of the waste bag on the waste bag, the longer it will take to grind it. Ronan's face changed for a while, and suddenly he sighed, reluctantly accepting the fact. It's okay if you want to go slowly. Good things never come to an end. When you become stronger, I will open all the magic stones for you sooner or later. Ronan could only comfort himself in this way. He put the 3 storage waste bags aside and took the bag that he used to collect protection fees during the day. He opened it and poured it all on the table and counted it. There were a total of 48 low-level magic stones, which was much more than Ronan expected. This was the result after he spared Barry and his son. In the battle with the senior apprentice black-robed wizard, almost half of the gray-robed wizards with him died. Logically, Ronan's income should have shrunk by half. But in fact, many surviving wizards paid more than the original 4 low-level magic stones. Compared with escaping from a high-level apprentice black-robed wizard, the extra protection fee was simply insignificant. This was also the reason why a group of gray-robed wizards sincerely paid Ronan the highest courtesy of wizards in the town square during the day. They won't tell anyone about this, right? Ronan suddenly worried that the news of him killing the high-level wizard apprentice black-robe would be spread, causing unnecessary trouble. But he quickly let it go. Just tell anyone, who would believe it? Yes, a small 5th-level wandering wizard killed a high-level apprentice black-robe wizard alone. Even if this kind of thing really happened in front of you, everyone who saw it would have to pinch their thighs hard to see if they were dreaming. Not to mention that it was just hearsay. Who would believe it? 48 low-level magic stones, plus the ones I carry with me, a total of 55. Ronan looked at the small pile of shiny pigeon eggs in front of him, and his heart was not too volatile. This amount of money was only equivalent to his income from rune engraving for more than a month in the past. In the past, he might have been a little excited, but in this period of soaring prices, it was really not worth spending. The small shabby hotel he was staying in now, which was almost built outside the town, cost 1 low-level magic stone a night, and breakfast and dinner were not included. If you want to improve your strength quickly, this amount of money is far from enough to audit the academy. Ronan stood up from the table, walked to the window of the hotel room, opened the window, and felt the moonlight. Find a way to open the black robe's waste bag as soon as possible. If possible, find an opportunity to go to the treehouse area again and get back the belongings hidden before. Also, the rune engraving skills must not be lost. Ronan leaned on the window sill with both hands, letting the breeze blow his half-dried long hair, thinking secretly in his heart. It was late at night, but there were still people walking on the street under the hotel. Some people whispered, and there seemed to be quarrels. In the distance, the small square at the entrance of the town was brightly lit, and Ronan seemed to hear the melodious and sad requiem tune standing there. Everything was brought by the black robes. It can be foreseen that in the days to come, the wizard's land will become more uneasy. Ronan listened to all this and thought of his master-level energy missiles. At the level of a wizard apprentice, he barely had a trump card to save his life. Although the cost of activating this trump card is quite high, it will consume all his mental power in an instant, and may even drain a part of his life. This is Ronan's guess based on his suddenly growing white hair. Energy Missile was promoted to master level and gave birth to a supernatural domain. Can other low-level spells also do the same? If every spell can have such a qualitative leap as long as the proficiency reaches master level, then I'm really awesome. Ronan thought of a possibility, and his heartbeat slightly accelerated, but he soon faced the reality. Even if it was as he thought, at this stage, he could only use one at most in each battle. His mental power was too low to support such a huge and frequent consumption. However, the proficiency of charge weapon will soon be upgraded to expert, so it is necessary to cultivate this spell to master level. Speaking of which, he still has to find time to buy another handy longsword. The previous one was broken in the battle with the black robe. Ronan was thinking, when he suddenly heard a humming sound like a whale. He hurriedly looked in the direction of the sound. After a round, I saw a huge object roaring into the sky in the direction of Hoddam Wizard Academy in the center of town. Under the bright moonlight, a huge black ship broke through the fog and rose into the sky, sailing away into the thick night. Ronan was stunned and couldn't help but stare at it for a moment. Chapter 45 Angry. The next morning, Ronan and his party left the hostel early in the morning and went to a small tavern that didn't look expensive. As the sun rose, there were quite a few people in the tavern, but most of them looked like they hadn't slept all night. The tavern was buzzing with people talking from time to time. Ronan and his 4 companions randomly chose a round table to sit down and ordered their own breakfast. After a night's rest, Ronan found that everyone was in good spirits. Old Wells looked much better, but he would cough from time to time. "I'll go find Andre and his sister, Kialin, later." Old Wells counted a few names. When he mentioned Linus, Ronan frowned, but didn't say anything. He just asked, "Do you know where they are?" "I don't know about the others," Old Wells replied, "but based on my understanding of Andre's half-elf brother and sister, they probably won't choose to enter the city even if they come here, so I plan to take Venetia and Cheryl around the town. It's a bit dangerous for the 3 of you to go." Ronan shook his head. "Let them follow me." Yesterday, countless wizards poured into the town. Now it's a mess everywhere, with all kinds of people. Ronan is worried that Old Wells will get into trouble when he takes the 3 old and weak people to act. "I'll take them to do some things and look at houses by the way. They are now officially moving into the town, so they urgently need a place to stay for a long time. They can't sleep in a hotel every day, and their money bags can't bear it." Old Wells didn't object to Ronan's proposal. At this time, their breakfasts came up. Ronan didn't know what he ordered. He looked at the plate of porridge and didn't know where to start. He lost his appetite when he thought that such a mess would cost a quarter of a magic stone. While they were eating, the wizards at the tables around them kept chatting. What they talked about was naturally the invasion of the Black Robes. Some said that yesterday, several wizard villages in the forest near Hoddam were all slaughtered by the Black Robes, and the bodies were all refined into undead puppets. Some said that at dawn, a large group of senior apprentices hurried out of the Central Academy, and it looked like the Academy launched a counterattack against the invasion of the Black Wizard land. Some said that there was a formal battle between wizard-level masters in the deep forest on the east side, and the energy aftermath of the spell bombardment directly flattened a small mountain. These were all gossips that Ronan heard from who knows where, some true and some false, and he just listened to them for fun. Suddenly, a voice rang out in the tavern. "Did you see the ship that left the Academy last night?" When this sentence was spoken, the whole tavern suddenly became quiet. Ronan clearly saw that the hand of Old Wells holding the fork to put food on Cheryl's plate paused for a moment. Then someone lamented, "Alice, anyway, we won't get a ride on the boat. We don't know when we will have the next chance to leave Hoddam." No one spoke anymore, and everyone fell silent. After leaving the pub, Ronan took Venetia and Cheryl and made an appointment with Old Wells to meet again, and then went their separate ways. Old Wells had rich life experience and a wide network of contacts, and was more suitable for finding people than him. Ronan led Venetia and the others to a real estate agency and specifically told Venetia, "You and Cheryl just wait here obediently. If the door is open, go in and ask about the price. When I come back, I will take you to see it together." Venetia nodded softly and stood on the roadside with Cheryl obediently. Ronan bought each of them a donut-like thing to chew, and then hurried in another direction alone. Walking straight in along the middle road at the fork in the town entrance, there were large patches of ivy on both sides of the road, which were still green and shiny in late autumn. The memory of his previous life awakened in his mind. If he continued walking, it would not be long before Ronan could see a huge black iron gate, with wizard statues on both sides of the iron gate, and the statues were covered with black, white and gray owls. But before Ronan could see the black iron gate in his memory, he found that the front was blocked by a thick white fog like milk. He tried to walk a few steps into the thick fog, but was blocked by a layer of rune magic circle. Ronan was dumbfounded. How could he walk? In an emergency, did Hoddam Wizard Academy not allow non-academicians to approach? What about his application for admission? Ronan hesitated and wandered outside the rune magic circle for a long time, and after waiting for a long time, he finally caught someone who walked out of the thick fog and magic circle. He was wearing a robe with a logo of the Hoddam Wizard Academy. He looked very young and could be identified as a student of the academy. "Brother, why is there no way to enter the academy now? I want to apply for admission." Ronan didn't care what the other party thought of him or what his strength was. He just grabbed him and asked. The young wizard seemed very dissatisfied when Ronan stopped him, but he still replied coldly, "Enroll? Enroll in what? The academy stopped recruiting students a few months ago." "What?" Ronan was stunned on the spot, a little unconvinced. "Stop recruiting? Why? Our auditor's not accepted." The latter was too lazy to say another word to him. He snorted, pulled his robe and walked away. Ronan was left standing there alone, speechless for a long time. "I said this is the price now, you can rent it or not. If you can't afford it, get out, don't block the people queuing behind you." The thin man with two dark circles under his eyes waved his hands impatiently, pretending to be disgusted and driving away. "Huh?" A big hand tore through the air, stretched out and grabbed the collar of the man's robe, and with a bang the man was pressed hard against the wooden board of the wall behind him, leaving a shallow pit. "Didn't I say I won't rent it? Can't you take a look at the place first? Believe it or not, I will tear your mouth apart right now." Ronan's eyes were cold and hard, and he exuded a strong and cold aura, like a beast that could suddenly attack and hurt people at any time. The man he pressed against turned pale, looked at him with horror, and stammered, "Go. I'll take you to see it now." Ronan didn't say anything, just looked down at the man with an expressionless face. But his eyes didn't seem to be focused on the man. With the man's disordered and rapid breathing, the atmosphere in the small room became more and more depressing. Just when the man was so nervous that he was sweating profusely, Ronan's hand suddenly loosened again and put it down. "Forget it," Ronan said lightly, "I don't want to think about it now." After saying that, he turned around and walked straight out the door. When they walked to the street at the entrance, they heard an angry shout behind them. "The people from the Academy law enforcement team will be here soon. If you have the guts, don't leave." Ronan narrowed his eyes, turned around, and kicked the door of the agency to pieces with a bang. The shouting inside stopped immediately. "Let's go." After doing all this, he called Vivian and the others to leave. The gray-robed wizards who were passing by and waiting to find a house to rent all looked at him as if he were a monster, and made way for him. The three of them walked through 2 streets in silence, and Ronan suddenly felt someone secretly pulling the hem of his robe. Looking down, he found Cheryl looking up at him timidly. Ronan blinked, squatted down and asked, "What's wrong?" Cheryl seemed to be a little afraid of Ronan. She took 2 steps back, and then stammered, "Sister Vivian asked me to ask you if you are angry because she is too useless and can't do even the smallest things well." Oh. Chapter 46 Burden. Ronan subconsciously looked for Venetia. The girl was standing under a yellow pine tree about 7 or 8 meters away from Ronan. She lowered her head, almost buried it in her chest, and kept grabbing the hem of her robe with her hands in front of her. She looked so ashamed and self-blaming that she had no place to hide. When Venetia felt Ronan looking at her, her face turned red all the way to her neck. Not to mention, although the skin on Venetia's face and hands was dark and rough, the small part below the collarbone was dazzlingly white, like the milk they drank in the morning. Seeing Venetia like this, Ronan was a little speechless. The main reason why he was angry was that the college stopped recruiting students, and his next plan was completely ruined. He was upset, and the real estate agent was foul-mouthed and looked down on people. It had nothing to do with Venetia. He didn't expect the girl to be able to handle the troublesome matter of finding a house. Of course not. Ronan shook his head decisively at Cheryl. "That's because of me." Cheryl sighed like an adult and said in a depressed tone, "I know that I have always been a burden to you. I am so useless, I can't do anything, and I always drag you down. Ronan, aren't women so fragile and sensitive? After coaxing the older one, you have to coax the younger one?" Ronan felt a headache, and after thinking about it, he asked Cheryl, "What kind of people do you think are useful?" Cheryl counted on her fingers and replied, "Either like Grandpa Wells, who knows everything. Or like you, who is super good at fighting and can always lead everyone out of danger. Or like Sister Winnie, who is beautiful and kind-hearted." Ronan couldn't help laughing, reached out and touched Cheryl's little head, and said, "No one is born knowing everything and is useful." After saying a few words, Ronan was stunned, as if thinking about something, and the whole person stood up slowly and unconsciously. "If one day you feel like you have become a burden to others," Ronan looked towards the Hoddam Wizard Academy, his eyes flashing, and he whispered to himself, "Then work hard to make yourself stronger." After saying this, Ronan exhaled a breath of turbid air, and felt that the many annoyances and depressions that had been weighing on his heart were swept away. Originally, He said these words to comfort Cheryl, but who knew that he would enlighten himself unconsciously. Ronan, who was in a relaxed mood, looked down and saw that Cheryl's young face was full of a look of confusion. With a slight smile, Ronan bent down and picked up Cheryl and walked forward, while Venetia followed behind them, chatting with Cheryl as they walked. "Do you have the talent of a wizard?" "Of course, Grandpa Wells said that my qualifications are much better than his." "Maybe he is trying to coax you." "No, Grandpa Wells never lies." "Then I will teach you to meditate tonight." After waiting at the agreed place until the afternoon, Ronan and the other two finally saw old Wells, who had hurried over. "I didn't see Andre and his sister, but I did see Jacob, a blond fat boy whom I hadn't seen for a long time." As soon as he saw Ronan, Jacob came up to him excitedly. "Lord Ronan, it's great to see you again." Ronan was also a little happy. In the treehouse area, the person who had the best relationship with him, except for old Wells, was probably Jacob, who had been patrolling with him for several months. When he escaped yesterday, he didn't find Jacob, and Ronan was really worried for a while. "Where did you go? Why didn't I see you yesterday?" Ronan asked as soon as he came up. Jacob seemed a little embarrassed and scratched his head and said, "Yesterday I went shopping for someone and came to the town early in the morning. As a result, when I came out after buying the things, I heard that the black robes had attacked and the treehouse area fell. It was really an enviable luck." Ronan sighed in his heart. He didn't know how many gray robes died in the forest yesterday, but Jacob, who was usually the most timid and cowardly, escaped. But all my belongings are still in the treehouse, and I have used all the magic stones I brought with me to buy a bunch of random things that I can't use at all." Jacob had a sad expression on his face, and while speaking, he reached out and pulled out a few women's sanitary napkins from the package on his back. Everyone was speechless, and Ronan could only comfort him that it was okay. According to the current situation, these things in his hands could be sold sooner or later, and he might even make a small profit. Jacob felt better. Andre's brother and sister live in a cave outside the town. They are not used to living in the city. Old Wells took out a note and said, "They gave me the address of where Mr. and Mrs. Kiao Lin live now. Do you want to go find them?" Everyone looked at Ronan. Their small mutual aid group, which was initiated by Old Wells, no longer needed to exist after leaving the treehouse area. Now whether to continue to maintain it depends entirely on Ronan's opinion. Ronan thought about it and followed his original plan to enroll in Hoddam directly after entering the town. But now the academy has stopped recruiting students, and the plan has been disrupted. The only choice is to stay in the town. It is better to live with everyone than to live alone, so that we can take care of each other. "Go," Ronan said. "Kyalin lost an arm, and now is the most difficult time. Let's go and take a look." When Ronan said this, everyone's faces showed obvious joy. After all, Ronan is now the core of the entire small group. "By the way, where's Linus?" Ronan asked. Old Wells had obviously learned about Linus's actions from Andre, and replied with a slightly complicated expression, "After leaving the forest, he parted ways with Andre and the others. I don't know where he is now." Ronan nodded and didn't care. For people like Linus, as long as he doesn't stay around to harm his own people, it doesn't matter where he goes. The group followed a note given by Andre and found the edge of the town all the way, almost approaching the residential area in the wild. Then, in a dim and damp hut where there was almost no light, they found Kiao Lin, who was pale and lying on the bed recuperating, and Mrs. Kiao Lin, who was sitting beside him to take care of him. Seeing everyone, the desolate and helpless couple were so happy that they almost cried. In fact, for wizards, losing an arm is really not a big deal. Not to mention that the wizard group pursues the immortality of the soul, and the physical body is just a shell, so it doesn't matter if you have more arms or less arms. Even if you really feel uncomfortable with one hand, the wizarding world has ways to solve it. But judging from the current financial situation of the Kiao Lin couple, they can't think about getting a new arm in the short term, so just make do with it for now. After finding the Kiao Lin couple, everyone discussed it and finally decided to find a few houses nearby to live in. First, the rent here is cheap. Except for Ronan, basically everyone who is not well off has little choice. Second, it is convenient to live here to go out of the city, and it can solve some food problems on weekdays. Chapter 47, Filling in the Gaps. The wash basin, the squat toilet, the bathtub, the stove, tisk. There's also a fireplace. Ronan stood in the middle of the room, looking around at everything in his new home. Seeing the fireplace covered with dust and cobwebs, he curiously poked his head in to take a closer look. Winter is coming soon, and it will come in handy then. Ronan sat down in front of the only table in the room, picked up the old copper kettle on the table and shook it, then put it down again. Overall, Ronan was quite satisfied with his new home. The room was not big, but it was much more spacious than the tree house he had lived in before. Although the furniture was old, at least there were all the necessary things. A very important point was that there was a toilet in the house, so he would no longer have to empty the urine pot himself. It was not easy to find a house with decent living conditions on Waterdrop Street, which was known as the slum of the town. This house was one of the best in the nearby area, and of course the rent was nearly half higher than that of an ordinary house. The glass oil lamp gave off a dim light. Ronan sat at the table, supporting his chin with one hand and tapping the table unconsciously with the other hand, like a person who was so bored that he didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the sound of his fingers tapping the table stopped. Ronan came back to his senses and said faintly, "Hoddam Wizard Academy." I don't know if it was because his original body had dropped out of Hoddam and was unwilling to do it, or because he had been a student for more than 10 years in his previous life and had a well-behaved experience. Ronan found that he had always had an inexplicable obsession with enrollment and school in his heart. So much so that when he learned that the academy had stopped recruiting students during the day, he almost lost his mind. Now thinking back, his biggest purpose for wanting to enter the academy for further studies was nothing more than a key inheritance to become a formal wizard. Putting this aside, it's not that he has to enter the academy immediately. The most important task of the apprentice stage is to accumulate spiritual power. I still have a long way to go before I am qualified to challenge the realm of a formal wizard. It doesn't matter whether I can enter now. I have time to be unwilling and irritable. Ronan stood up, stared at the glass oil lamp in front of him, and said to himself, "It is better to think more about how to survive the crisis of the Black Wizard invasion. When I become an 8th level or 9th level wizard apprentice, things may take a new turn." Thinking of this, Ronan couldn't help but review his previous battles. These rescue and escape battles seemed to be safe and sound, but in fact, they reflected a lot of problems. The most important one is the serious lack of control methods. Ronan couldn't help frowning. He had almost no control skills. He killed the Black Robe several times by relying on the super lethality of energy missile and the unexpected timing of the attack. Facing an opponent with a standing output, Ronan's fighting method might still work. However, if he faced an enemy that was alert and could move flexibly, such as the two-headed demon lizard, his weakness of lacking effective control methods would be immediately exposed. Energy missile missed several times in a row, and finally let the two-headed demon lizard escape. Control skills are an indispensable and important part of any perfect combat system. Only by effectively restricting the opponent's actions can the hit rate of energy missile be maximized. And spells with similar effects. Ronan thought about it, perhaps only ice and lightning spells are more suitable for him. The former usually comes with spell effects such as freezing and slowing, while the latter comes with special effects such as paralysis and stiffness. These two spells are also relatively common in the Hoddam wizard land and are relatively easy to obtain. Let's go to the market sometime and see if we can buy another suitable protective magic tool. In the battle with the senior apprentice Black Robe, Ronan felt the importance of protective magic tools for the first time. If he hadn't brought a magic ring with 2 protection runes with him, which he activated at the critical moment, he would have fallen down in hatred when facing the Black Robe Wizard's corpse explosion spell and the sword and shield skeleton servants in the first round. How could he have been promoted to the master level of energy missile and opened a series of things in the extraordinary domain? You can never have too many of these life-saving things, especially in this situation. Ronan touched his chin and even considered whether to learn a defensive 0-level spell. Later, he thought about it and decided to forget it. There are really not many people who learn defensive spells during the apprentice stage, because 0-level defensive spells are generally fragile and can't withstand 2 hits from spells of the same level. Instead of wasting the limited mental power to passively take a beating, it is better to think about how to kill the opponent faster and end the battle directly. Attack, control, defense. After that, it's the aspects of recovery and gain. In the battle between wizards, on-the-spot recovery is still very important, especially in the wizard apprentice stage, when the mental power is not enough. Spirit recovery potion, healing potion, detoxification potion, Physical potion. Ronan thought of a lot of potions that might come in handy, and they were all summarized based on several battles. As for the means of on-the-spot enhancement, Ronan can currently consider only the bodybuilding method that he usually practices. Strong physical fitness is still beneficial, which can greatly increase the tolerance in battle. Ronan thinks that this is the case at least in the apprentice stage. Many wizards look down on bodybuilding and are unwilling to waste time on it. They think that it is better to meditate and do witchcraft research. Or they think that bodybuilding does not match the noble and respected status of wizards. It is something that only ordinary knights who are worthy of being wizards' followers will do. He has no reservations or concerns about this. Money, money. In the end, Ronan found that no matter which aspect of the plan, it is impossible to avoid a very critical thing: magic stone. Taking drugs requires magic stones, buying spells requires magic stones, and purchasing magic tools requires magic stones. Even bodybuilding requires magic stones to buy monster meat to assist in practice. Everything would be easy if there was a magic stone, but without it, all the plans would be nothing but empty talk. Take your time. You'll always get what you need. Ronan comforted himself, stretched out his hand to light the oil lamp in front of him, and then took out 3 storage waste bags. If you want to get rich, the fastest way is to open these 3 safes on hand. Dawn broke, and he had a sleepless night. Ronan yawned and pushed the door open from the house, patted his robe casually, and activated a clean rune engraved on the robe. The odor that had been stuffy in the hut for a night immediately disappeared without a trace, and his whole body became clean and refreshed. However, after several battles, this originally brand new robe has become a little shabby, with several holes, but Ronan was reluctant to replace it with a new one. Wizards hate physical training in close combat. Is it because it takes too much time to wear the robe? Ronan thought about it in his mind, chanted a spell, and threw a ice ball on the ground in front of him. Chapter 48, The Forest of Death. The ice ball, which was emitting a chilling cold, hit the ground with a muffled bang. The uneven road in front of the house had a shallow pit covered with frost. Don't you know the forbidden law in this city? Do you have any sense of public morality? An old wizard passing by with a bucket was startled by the sudden movement, and was about to come up and accuse Ronan with a stern face. However, he felt a mental power fluctuations emanating from Ronan, which belonged to a level 5 apprentice, and his face suddenly changed. He quickly closed his mouth and hurried away. Oh, I forgot that we are not on the forest now. Ronan just remembered it, stretched out his hand and patted his forehead, then walked up with a look of annoyance and self-blame and dug out a few pieces of broken ice from the pit blasted by the ice ball to wipe his face and wash. The main reason is that we were so lazy when we lived in the tree house area before. When we needed water, we just used ice ball magic. Why did we need to carry a bucket to the water point and queue up to get water? Ronan chewed ice cubes and brushed his teeth, sighing that living in the city was really troublesome, while thinking about what he had gained last night. He had already opened one of the 3 storage waste bags by nearly 1/3. At this rate, it would be opened smoothly the day after tomorrow at the latest. This storage waste bag with good progress was obtained during the first rescue of the 3 old wells. The original owner was the weakest among the 3 black robes killed by Ronan. He died after only 1 energy missile. It was precisely because the original owner was the weakest, the storage waste bag left behind was the lowest level, and the mental power mark left on the waste bag was the lowest, so it was the easiest to crack. Ronan was thinking about it, and suddenly saw a small figure walking towards him. Cheryl looked sleepy, as if she had just been pulled out of bed. Her hair was messy. She rubbed her eyes and yawned, mumbling to Ronan, "Lord Ronan, Sister Winnie is calling you to have breakfast." Ronan was refreshed when he heard this. He had just moved to a new house and had nothing. He was worried about how to solve the problem of breakfast. Got it. Ronan immediately spit out the ice in his mouth and strode towards the residence of Lineage and others. When he passed by Cheryl, who was drooping and yawning, he quietly put his hand that had just touched the ice cube on the back of her neck. Watching Cheryl, who was completely awake in the next second and ran out screaming, Ronan was bathed in the morning light and felt happy. It's another new and beautiful day. Everyone enjoyed breakfast together. Mrs. Kyalin and Lineage made delicious omelets and cream mushroom soup. After Ronan finished his breakfast, he quietly left a sum of magic stones as food expenses, and then went back to his room. 3 days later. Ronan's cabin. With a crisp sound in his mind, as if a lock was opened, The mouth of the black waste bag in Ronan's hand quietly opened. Ronan's face also showed a deep joy. Finally, it's done. Without rushing to check it immediately, Ronan first washed his face with cold water to relieve the fatigue of 3 days of almost sleepless nights. Then he carefully drew the curtains, and under the dim oil lamplight, he picked up the waste bag again. The mental power slowly seeped in, and a wonderful feeling suddenly arose from his heart. Ronan saw a black space of about 1 cubic meter in size appearing in front of him, which was filled with various things in a mess. He took out the things in the storage waste bag one by one. After a while, Ronan roughly divided the things in the storage waste bag into 3 piles and placed them in front of him. One pile was worthless necessities, such as dirty clothes, smelly socks, unfinished food, clean water, nail clippers, and a silver ear spoon. Well, this black robe seems to be quite particular about personal hygiene. Another pile was valuable things. These included 3 intermediate magic stones, 42 low-level magic stones, a bone magic ring, a black badge, several wizard books, and several bottles of potions whose specific effects were uncertain. Looking at this pile of things, Ronan's heart trembled slightly. Get rich. Although before opening the storage waste bag, he had imagined many times in his mind how much wealth he could get from it, when the fact really happened as he expected, he couldn't help but get excited. This was the first time Ronan had an intermediate magic stone. It was slightly larger than the low-level magic stone, also black, but deeper, and the energy particles precipitated inside were far superior to the low-level ones, like a better quality gem. 3 intermediate magic stones and 42 low-level magic stones. Even if the price of the potion that directly improves mental power soars, I can afford it. Ronan put the 3 intermediate magic stones under the oil lamp and looked at them again and again, then carefully put them away. The rest, the magic ring, was intermediate, and only enchanted a rune that Ronan did not recognize. In addition, Ronan faintly felt that there seemed to be a group of negative energy particles that were condensed and not dispersed in the ring. This seemed a bit incredible for a magic tool that had not yet been activated. Ronan touched the ring curiously and puzzledly, and the next moment, Valenzuela. You bitch. A woman in a long skirt with a pale face and a translucent figure suddenly rushed out of the ring screaming, scaring Ronan so much that his body trembled and his hair stood up. The cold wind in the room blew out the oil lamp directly, and the woman in the long skirt hit the wall and disappeared. A few seconds later, a woman's scream and the sound of banging things came from the house next door. Ronan hurriedly urged the magic ring, and the runes on the ring were activated, and an inexplicable suction force came out. A moment later, the ghost-like woman in the white dress emerged from the wall again, as if being dragged by something and sucked back into the ring. Before she disappeared, she kept cursing the name Valenzuela, as if she had a blood feud with the owner of the name. Ghost? Ronan lit the oil lamp again, and his heart was shocked. Ghosts are actually a combination of souls and energy particles that remain after a person dies. They usually don't have much wisdom, but are supported by an obsession. Who would have thought that this seemingly ordinary intermediate magic ring actually kept a ghost? Ronan subconsciously picked up the black badge next to the ring and took a closer look. This kind of badge generally represents the identity and origin of the original owner. One side of the badge was engraved with a black forest, and each tree in the forest seemed to be twisted in entangled limbs and bones, and countless growing bones worshipped the blood moon above. On the other side, Ronan read out the secret in strange small words. The forest of dead words. No wonder. Ronan understood it immediately. Thinking about it carefully, the 3 black robes he encountered were indeed using some undead spells. It turns out that the dark wizard force that invaded Hoddam is called the Forest of Dead Words. Ronan didn't dare to touch the ring again, for fear that the unlucky wizard next door who had just been frightened would call the law enforcement team of the academy, so he simply packed up his things and prepared to leave the city. As a result, as soon as he opened the door, he saw a figure walking out of the next door with a lot of bags on his back. Seeing that he was in a panic, in a hurry, and ran out of the city without looking back, it seemed that he was planning to run away on the spot. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49, Howling of the Dead, A Time of Tranquility. Although the victim was frightened and fled, Ronan still left the city for safety reasons. In the wilderness outside the city, he found a hidden place with bright moonlight and continued to check the remaining things. There were 4 wizard books. One of them was full of legends of wizards and monsters of the undead system, like a collection of stories to relieve boredom. One was about potions, which was much more detailed and complete than the one Ronan left in the treehouse. The remaining 2 books recorded 3 undead spells, 2 low-level 0-level, corrosive missile, and skeleton spike, and 1 intermediate 0-level, howl of the dead. Ronan studied the latter for a long time and found that it was mainly about how to control the undead to send out sonic shocks to affect the opponent's mental casting. No wonder the Black Robe had a magic ring for raising ghosts in his hand. It was probably because he didn't study it clearly, so he didn't wear it on his body. All 3 spells were undead system, and Ronan was struggling whether to learn them. There was nothing much to say about the first 2 low-level ones, but the main thing was the last intermediate, Howl of the Dead, spell. This spell actually meets Ronan's requirements for control methods. The specific inheritance and casting props are also available. It can be said that it is specially prepared for Ronan. However, once you learn the spells of the necromancy, you will inevitably be stained with traces of negative energy particles. At this critical moment when the Black Wizard is invading, will the wizards in the academy regard you as an undercover agent of the Forest of Death? Ronan hesitated and finally decided to put it aside. Among the remaining bottles of potions, 1 bottle looked like a potion for quickly restoring mental power, but he was worried that the inheritance between the Black Robe and the Grey Robe was different, and there might be some differences in taking the potion, so he didn't dare to touch it. The last pile of miscellaneous items that were collected, the specific value of which was uncertain, were mostly animal viscera soaked in special potions, air-dried animal corpses, unknown powders, strange wood chips, etc., which looked like materials used for alchemy or potion experiments. Ronan wanted to throw it away, but he had read too many novels in his previous life, and he was worried that there might be some great treasure hidden in it. After much hesitation, he finally took advantage of the night to burn it together with the first pile of garbage. As the last leaf of the sycamore tree in the forest fell, the battle between the Hoddam Wizard Land and the Dark Wizard Land of the Forest of Death began. Almost every day, teams of well-trained elite wizards can be seen walking out of the academy. The magic airship swayed away, and even formal wizards like the scorching sun broke through the air to accompany them. After the real war started, it had little to do with the wandering wizard groups scattered in the town. The war between the 2 wizard gathering places was for large resource points and strategic points that were crucial to force. The life and death of the lower-level wizard group had almost no impact on the entire war situation. The wandering wizards who had temporarily escaped the life crisis discussed the topic of this battle after dinner. What about the war between real wizards, the fierce competition for the small magic stone mine, the competition between the talented wizard students of Hoddam College and the Forest of Dead language? All kinds of news and rumors are flying everywhere. In the town, the collective atmosphere of tension, uneasiness and anxiety has quietly changed to a stable, peaceful environment mixed with inexplicable enthusiasm and noise. Crunch! Ronan stepped on the thick snow, leaving a footprint of neither deep nor shallow. He picked up a few light yellow matsutake mushrooms brought out from the snow, threw them into his storage waste bag, and then continued to move forward. This thing tastes good when used for pan frying and making soup. Vanessa has learned a good cooking skill from Mrs. Kiao Lin, and she can let her cook it later. There was a buzzing sound of wind behind him. Ronan stopped, stood on a snow slope and turned his head to look. In the town circle covered with heavy snow, in the vast white fog in the center, several magic airships that looked like sailboats sprang out. The light of the rune array was flashing on the airship, and the figure of the wizard in the robe could be vaguely seen in the light. Recently, the academy seems to have sent out airships more and more frequently. Has the war situation changed again? Ronan stared at the several magic airships flying away under the clear sky, his eyes flashing, thinking secretly in his heart. However, this matter has little to do with him, a small wandering wizard apprentice. He took a look and continued to move forward, towards the direction of the forest. As the war progressed, the crisis of the black robes hanging over the wandering gray robes seemed to fade. After several heavy snows in winter, the forest became more and more peaceful. These days, more and more people can't hold back and start to sneak in and out of the forest. Ronan heard that some people have even moved back to the former tree house area. They are all forced to do so. After a few months, Many people probably can't stand it anymore, Ronan thought silently in his heart. Nowadays, the prices in the town have fallen a lot and tended to be stable, but the cost of living is still high compared to before the Black Robes came. After taking refuge in the town for several months, for many low-level wizards, the most worrying thing at the moment is not to avoid the crisis brought by the Black Robe, but how to survive this cold winter smoothly. Ronan looked to both sides. On the white snow, he could see many black spots like him, slowly moving towards the forest. Everyone has a mountain of life on their shoulders, and it is difficult to move forward. Ronan shook his head and exerted force on his feet. Boom! A big hole exploded on the snow. His long robe fluttered like a cloak, and he rushed into the forest as agile as an ape. Running fast based on his memory, he startled the flocks of winter birds. Ronan entered the forest this time mainly to go back to the tree house where he lived before and retrieve the belongings he had saved a few months ago. After jogging for a while, Ronan felt that the accumulated depression in his heart had been almost cleared, so he slowed down his pace. He pushed aside the snow and found an underground spring under a tree hole with white steam. He took a few sips and felt that he was approaching his destination. The heavy snow covered all traces of the disasters that had happened. Only the lonely and ethereal calls of the forest birds seemed to still recall the bustle of the past. Crack! Ronan broke off a few branches that blocked the way with his bare hands, and the familiar scene of the tree house came into view. Covered with thick snow, the long vines hanging from the top were covered with icicles, and there was no sign of anyone. Ronan went up to the tree house, opened the door and looked around the scene inside. Except for the mattress wet by the snow and the furniture covered with dust, everything was the same as when he left. Standing in the cabin and silently reminiscing about the past for a while, Ronan quickly put away some things. Mainly a few wizard books on the bookshelf, unused blank runestones, rune engraving knives, and some miscellaneous items left by his predecessor that he didn't know whether they were useful or not. Before leaving, Ronan stood by the small wooden bed. Looking at the word soul as the destination of immortality engraved on the edge of the bed, Ronan thought for a moment, took out the knife he carried with him, and added some more content under the bed along the edge of the bed. Chapter 50, Lord Francois sends you greetings. After mastering this method, the apprentice will be able to do anything and become a wizard. Ronan used the knife to carve the contents of the small half of austerity body forging on the back of the bed, and finally left his signature Ronan Damien in a chic manner. I wonder if the next wizard who lives in this house can find the secret book I left behind. Ronan thought with anticipation in his heart. It's not entirely a bad taste. What he left behind is indeed something useful for the low-level wizard apprentices. The wizards who will live in the tree house area are probably not much better than him in terms of qualifications. Perhaps they are also suffering from energy erosion. The method of austerity body forging can solve this problem very well. Ronan tried it himself and it worked. Although the practice process is a bit tricky, it is good for the growth of mental strength. The super strong physique brought by austerity body forging is a strong helper for the low-level wizard apprentices. If you can make good use of it, you may still be able to get ahead from a low-level apprentice. But isn't it a bit inappropriate to engrave a bodybuilding method under the motto that emphasizes immortality of the soul? Well, this is just right. Only those who can ignore worldly prejudices can grasp the way out I left behind. Ronan blew the sawdust on the knife with satisfaction and put the knife away again. He walked out of the treehouse, closed the door, and landed lightly on the snow below. Ronan dug under the fourth oak tree on the left side of the tree house for a while and finally found his belongings, 12, protection, runes and more than 20 low-level magic stones carefully wrapped in a black cloth, intact. Ronan counted the belongings that he once treasured as his life and felt a sense of emotion in his heart. This wealth is nothing to him now, but having the opportunity to get it back, he still feels a sense of joy and satisfaction of regaining what he has lost. Just after putting the things into his waist bag, Ronan's expression suddenly changed, and the whole person stood up quickly, looking in a certain direction. Shoo! A figure emerged from the bushes, patting the thin snow on his head while muttering to Ronan, I guess that you are a strange guy. You are here to get something. The thin man in the gray wizard robe suddenly noticed Ronan's empty hands, and then as if he thought of something, a huge surprise suddenly appeared on his face, and he quickly shouted behind him, storage waste bag. Lord Francois. This guy has a storage waste bag. It's a big fish. Big fish. Before the voice fell, Another figure walked out from behind the bushes. This person wore a dark gold-edged robe, holding a black staff, with exquisite silver eyebrow ornaments on his face, black hair draped over his shoulders, and his lips slightly pursed. The whole person showed a majestic and powerful momentum. The thin wizard approached the black-haired man and whispered a few words to him. The latter snorted, and the thin wizard immediately turned around with a smile on his face and shouted at Ronan, "Lord Francois told you to leave the things you just took from under the tree, as well as the storage waste bag you carry with you, and all the magic tools behind." Ronan looked at the two people in front of him, and his brows frowned a little bit. He realized that he had encountered a wizard who was robbing him. He didn't know when he was targeted, and it seemed that he had been following him all the way. The thin wizard who was speaking was fine, just an ordinary third-level wizard apprentice, but the wizard he called Lord Francois seemed to be a high-level wizard apprentice. While Ronan was thinking, the thin wizard had already shouted again, "Are you deaf, kid? If you don't do it obediently, then prepare to bear the wrath of Lord Francois." After saying that, as if to confirm what he said, the black-haired man next to the thin wizard snorted coldly, and a powerful mental wave came out of his body. The powerful aura, like the sun's rays, slightly distorted the air, causing the snow on the surrounding trees and leaves to fall down. Level 9 Apprentice, Gasification Wizard. Ronan was shocked and his face suddenly turned cold. Just as he was about to take action, a thunderous roar suddenly exploded in his ears. Roar. The terrifying sound waves shattered countless snow, and a huge figure suddenly rushed into the field. Thick limbs, a body covered with dark red scales, one large and one small, two heads like pythons. Along with the rolling smelly hot air, a brutal and violent atmosphere instantly enveloped the whole field. High-level magical beast. Seeing this huge monster that suddenly appeared, the thin male wizard made a sound of fear that was deformed, and sat down on the snow with a thump. The black-haired man beside him also turned pale and stepped back in fear. However, before the two of them could recover from the great shock and despair, they felt an indescribable terrifying aura rising from the other side. Subconsciously turning their heads to look, the two people's expressions were instantly stagnant. The young wizard who had just been threatened and blackmailed by them was now surrounded by countless mysterious auras. The snow under his feet melted in large pieces, and the strong wind lifted the hem of his robe, revealing his slender and upright body underneath. His long hair was flying, and an indescribable terrifying force field was generated, distorting the light, and finally merged into three mysterious and deep black light spots at his fingertips. "You dare to come back to me." The low and cold voice was blown up by the cold wind, and Ronan pointed coldly, and three pure black light spots were wrapped in the momentum of a world-destroying torrent, silently rolling forward. The two-headed demon lizard that appeared strongly immediately had a look of fear and retreat in its eyes, and flew back without saying a word. But it was still hit by the transparent and invisible torrent force field. Without making any sound of collision, the entire lower body of the huge demon lizard turned into blood mist, and the grass, sand, and soil below quickly disintegrated and melted. A shrill scream sounded on the field, and most of the black shadow rushed forward quickly like lightning, and disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving only a bloody mess and a huge deep pit that seemed to appear out of thin air. With flying long hair and raised robe slowly falling, Ronan stared coldly at the direction where the two-headed demon lizard fled in panic. It was the two-headed demon lizard that he had beaten away once before. I didn't expect it to be so vengeful. When it smelled his scent in the forest again, it immediately ran to seek revenge. Moreover, after not seeing it for a few months, this guy's strength seemed to have increased significantly. Not only did his body size grow again, but even his second head grew a little, joining the ranks of zero-level high-level magic beasts. With such a serious injury, he probably can't run far. Ronan didn't rush to catch up. He casually took out a bottle of potion from his waist bag, opened it and poured it into his mouth. Feeling the rapid recovery of his mental strength, he slowly turned his gaze to the other two people in the field. Seeing Ronan's gaze turned, the two robber wizards who had already been scared silly trembled violently. They looked at Ronan as if they saw something, with only absolute shock and horror. The black-haired man who was a senior wizard apprentice stared at Ronan with a tense face, his lips moving quickly. Ronan's face turned cold, thinking that he was secretly chanting spells. But he never thought that the next second the thin wizard's voice trembled. Francois said. He extends his most sincere greetings to you. Good morning, my dear sir. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like, Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.